My name is Ray Bishop, and at 73 years old, I thought I had seen the worst humanity had to offer during my tour in Vietnam. I was wrong. The enemy isn't always in the jungle. Sometimes she is wearing designer black heels, standing on the porch you built, with your own hands holding a glass of champagne while your son is being lowered into the ground. They told me grief comes in stages: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. They forgot the stage where you come home from burying your only child to find your life's possessions soaking in the rain. When the lawyer read the final clause of my son's will, my daughter-in-law didn't just cry. She fainted. But before we get to that moment of sweet justice, you need to see how a man can lose everything in a single afternoon and find the strength to burn the world down to get it back. If you have ever been underestimated by someone who thought you were too old or too weak to fight back, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments which city or state you are listening from. I want to see how far this story travels. The rain was coming down hard in Detroit, the kind of cold gray drizzle that seeps right into your bones and makes my arthritis flare up like fire. I parked my old truck at the curb, my hand shaking just a little as I pulled the key from the ignition. It wasn't the age. It was the hollowness. Leaving Marcus back there in that plot of earth felt like leaving a piece of my own chest behind. I just wanted to go inside, sit in my leather armchair, pour a glass of bourbon, and stare at the wall until the silence stopped screaming. But as I looked up at the house I had designed and built brick by brick 40 years ago, I blinked. I wiped my glasses, thinking the rain was playing tricks on me. It wasn't. There were men on my lawn, 3 of them. They were wearing blue coveralls and moving with a speed that was disrespectful to the dead. They were hauling things out of the front door. Not just any things. My things. I saw my brown leather recliner, the one shaped perfectly to my back, land upside down in the wet grass. Next came the oak coffee table Marcus had learned to walk around. Then a box of my books dumped carelessly so the pages splayed open, drinking up the mud. I didn't run. My knees wouldn't let me run anymore. But I moved as fast as a man with a cane and a broken heart could move. I marched up that driveway, the water splashing over my dress shoes. "Hey!" I shouted, my voice cracking. "What do you think you are doing? Put that down. That is my property." One of the movers, a big guy with a beard, stopped and looked toward the porch. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking for orders. I followed his gaze. Jessica was standing on the top step. She wasn't wearing black. She was wearing a charcoal gray suit that looked like it cost more than my truck, and her blonde hair was pulled back in a tight, severe bun. She was tapping away on her phone, looking bored. She looked up at me like I was a delivery driver who had arrived late with a pizza. "Keep moving it," she told the movers, her voice sharp and clear over the sound of the rain. "The truck is on an hourly rate." I reached the bottom of the steps, gripping the railing. "Jessica, what is this? We just put Marcus in the ground an hour ago. What is happening?" She finally slipped her phone into her pocket and crossed her arms. She looked down at me. Literally looked down at me. "Ray," she said, "I didn't think you would be back so soon. I thought you might go to a bar or something. It doesn't matter. You cannot come in." I stared at her. "Cannot come in? Jessica, this is my house. I built this house. My name is on the deed." "Was on the deed," she corrected me. A cruel little smile played on her lips. "You signed it over to Marcus 5 years ago when your company had those tax issues. Remember, to protect the assets. Well, Marcus is gone, and as his sole surviving spouse, this house and everything in it is now part of his estate." She paused, looking around the lawn. "Well, the valuable things are part of the estate. The rest of this junk is just cluttering up the staging area. I have a realtor coming at 8 in the morning. I felt a roar starting in my ears. It was the same sound I used to hear before a firefight. Staging area. She was selling the house, before the dirt on my son's grave had even settled. "You are evicting me," I asked, my voice dangerously low. "On the day of my son's funeral. I am liquidating assets to cover Marcus's debts," she said, checking her nails. "He wasn't as good with money as you thought, Ray. He left me with a pile of bills. This house is a liquidity solution. And frankly, I cannot have a 73-year-old man living in the basement when I am trying to market a luxury property. It ruins the aesthetic." I took a step up. She didn't flinch. 2 large men in black suits, men I hadn't noticed before, stepped out from the shadows of the porch pillars. They were not movers. They were private security. I stopped. I looked at the furniture on the lawn getting ruined. I looked at the house that held every memory of my late wife Martha and my son. Fine, I said. I gritted my teeth so hard I thought they would crack. Fine. You want the house. Take the damn house. You want the furniture. Burn it. I don't care. I pointed a shaking finger at the front door. I am going inside to get one thing. Just one thing. Then I will leave and you will never see me again. Jessica raised an eyebrow. Oh. And what is that? If it is the silver collection that has already been appraised and locked away, it is not the silver I spat. It is the blue ceramic urn on the mantelpiece. Martha's ashes. I am not leaving my wife in this house with you. For a second, just a second, I thought I saw a flicker of humanity in her eyes. But I was wrong. It was just calculation. She tilted her head, pretending to think. The blue jar, she said slowly. The dusty one with the chipped lid. It is not chipped, I said. It is hand-painted. Where is it? Oh, Ray, she sighed, shaking her head. I am sorry. My feng shui consultant was here earlier. She said that old pottery carries stagnant energy, dead weight. It clashed with the modern minimalist vibe we are going for. My heart stopped. The rain seemed to freeze in the air. What did you do? I whispered. I think the cleaners put it in the recycling bin this morning, she said, her tone as casual as if she were talking about an empty milk carton, or maybe the trash. I don't check the garbage, Ray. That is what hired help is for. Something inside me snapped. It wasn't a decision. It was a reflex. The Marine took over. I didn't see a woman anymore. I saw a threat. I saw a monster. You threw my wife in the trash, I roared. I lunged up the stairs. I moved faster than I had in 20 years. I forgot the cane. I forgot the pain in my knees. I just wanted to get my hands around her throat. I wanted to wipe that smirk off her face forever. Jessica shrieked and stumbled back, dropping her composure. But I never reached her. The two security guards moved like a wall. One of them, a guy with a neck as thick as a tree trunk, slammed his forearm into my chest. The air exploded out of my lungs. I went flying backward, tumbling down the concrete steps I had poured myself. I hit the wet grass hard. Mud splashed into my mouth. My glasses flew off. I laid there gasping for air, staring up at the gray sky, the rain washing over my face, mixing with the tears I refused to let fall. "Call the police!" Jessica screamed. Her voice was hysterical now, playing the victim perfectly. He attacked me. You saw it. He tried to kill me. I struggled to my elbows, trying to find my glasses in the mud. I could hear sirens in the distance. She had called them before I even arrived. This was a trap, a setup. She wanted a paper trail. She wanted an official reason to keep me away. The movers were looking at me with pity now, but they didn't stop working. They kept carrying my life out to the curb. By the time the police cruiser screeched into the driveway, I was standing up, leaning on my cane, covered in mud. Two officers approached, hands on their holsters. I knew them. Officer Miller and Officer Davison. I had bought tickets to their police benevolence ball every year for a decade. Mr. Bishop Miller said, looking uncomfortable. We got a call about a domestic disturbance. An assault. She threw my wife's ashes in the garbage, I said, pointing at Jessica. She is stealing my home. It is my home, Jessica shouted from the safety of the porch. I have the title. I have the death certificate. And I have witnesses that this man just tried to assault a grieving widow. I want him removed. I want a restraining order. Miller looked at me, then at Jessica. He knew. He knew exactly what was happening, but he also knew the law. He walked over to me, lowering his voice. Ray, you have to go, he said gently. Technically, the house belongs to her now. If you stay, she can press charges for trespassing or assault. Don't make me put cuffs on you, Ray. Not today. Not with Marcus just buried. I looked at the house one last time. I looked at the recycling bins lined up by the garage. They were empty. The truck had already come. Martha was gone. Marcus was gone. The house was gone. I straightened my back. I wiped the mud from my face with a handkerchief. I looked at Jessica, who was smoothing her suit, looking triumphant. You think you have won, Jessica, I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it carried across the yard. You think because you have the keys and the deed you are the owner, but you forgot who built the foundation. Get off my property, she hissed. I turned my back on her. I walked past the police officers, past the movers, past my soaking wet armchair. I climbed into my old truck. I didn't look back. I drove 2 miles down the road to a Motel 6. I paid cash for a room that smelled like stale cigarettes and bleach. I sat on the edge of the bed, my hands trembling, listening to the rain hit the window. I reached for my wallet to check how much cash I had left. That was when my phone buzzed. It was a notification from the bank. Alert: joint account ending in 4590 has been frozen by primary holder. She hadn't just taken the house. She had cut the money. Every dime of my retirement savings was in that account, commingled with Marcus's to help him qualify for loans. I was 73 years old. I was homeless. I was broke. And I was alone. But as I sat there in the dark watching the neon sign flicker outside, I didn't cry. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a small wet piece of paper I had salvaged from the glove box of my truck. It was a business card. Sarah Cohen, attorney at law. Marcus had given it to me 3 months ago, slipping it into my hand while Jessica was in the bathroom at a restaurant. "Keep this, Pop," he had whispered, looking terrified. "Just in case." I didn't know what it meant then. I thought he was just being paranoid. But now, remembering the cold look in Jessica's eyes, I realized my son had been playing a game I didn't understand. I stared at the number. The war wasn't over. It had just begun. The clerk behind the bulletproof glass at the Motel 6 didn't look up from his phone. He was a kid, maybe 20, with gauges in his ears and a neck tattoo that looked like a barcode. "Card declined," he said, his voice flat. I stared at the little black machine on the counter. The red light was blinking. It felt like a warning beacon. "Try it again," I said, keeping my voice steady. "That is a platinum visa. There is a limit of $50,000 on it." The kid sighed a long, exaggerated sound that made my hands curl into fists. He ran the card again. The machine buzzed. "Declined." "Look, old-timer," he said, finally looking up. "It says pickup card, contact issuer. That means the account is frozen or reported stolen. You got cash or not?" I stood there feeling the blood drain from my face. Frozen. Reported stolen. I stepped away from the counter, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I pulled out my phone and dialed the number on the back of the card. I knew the number by heart. I had been a client of that bank for 40 years. The automated voice was a chirpy female robot that thanked me for my patience. Patience. I had just been kicked out of my own home in the rain, and now I was standing in a lobby that smelled of floor wax and desperation, being told I was broke. Finally, a human voice came on the line. "Security Department, how can I help you?" "My name is Raymond Bishop," I said, gripping the phone so tight my knuckles turned white. "My card just got declined. I need to know why." There was a tapping of keyboard keys. A long pause. "Mr. Bishop, I see here that the primary account holder reported the cards lost and requested a full freeze on all assets pending a probate audit." "Primary account holder," I repeated. My voice was rising. "That is a joint account. I added my son Marcus to that account 5 years ago." "Yes, sir," the agent said, her voice dripping with professional indifference. "And since Mr. Marcus Bishop has passed away, his executor has full authority over the joint assets until the estate is settled. The executor is listed as Jessica Bishop." The name tasted like ash in my mouth. Jessica. She hadn't just changed the locks. She had cut the supply lines. She was besieging me. "Listen to me," I said, trying to keep the panic out of my voice. "You don't understand. 5 years ago, I sold my business, Bishop Construction. I built that company from a single pickup truck into the biggest contractor in the county. I sold it for $2 million to save my son from bankruptcy. I deposited that check into this account. That is my money, my life savings." "I am sorry, sir," the agent said. "But legally, once the funds are commingled in a joint account, they are considered shared assets. Without a court order, we cannot unfreeze them. Is there anything else I can help you with?" I hung up. I didn't say goodbye. I just let the phone drop to my side. I had done it. I had dug my own grave. I remembered the day I signed the papers. Marcus had been crying, sitting at my kitchen table, his head in his hands. "Dad, I messed up," he had said. "Jessica wants a lifestyle I can't afford. The market crashed. I'm going to lose everything." I had put my hand on his shoulder. "I am your father," I had told him. "We are bishops. We fix things. I sold the company. I paid his debts. And when I handed him control of the accounts, he had looked me in the eye and promised, 'You never have to worry, Dad. As long as I have $1, you have 50 cents. You will live with us. We will take care of you.' I trusted a handshake. I trusted blood. I forgot that when you marry a shark, blood is just something they smell in the water. I dug into my pocket. I pulled out a crumpled wad of bills. $46. That was all I had in the world. I went back to the counter. I put $40 on the tray. "Give me whatever room this buys," I said. The kid took the money. "Room 104, down the hall. Checkout is at 11. Room 104 was a box. The carpet was sticky. The wallpaper was peeling at the corners, revealing yellowed drywall underneath. There was a single bed with a polyester spread that had cigarette burns on it. I sat down on the edge of the bed. My knees were screaming. The adrenaline from the confrontation at the house was fading, leaving behind a cold, aching exhaustion. I looked around the room. This was it. This was where a lifetime of hard work and sacrifice had ended. A Motel 6 on the side of the interstate. I thought about the house, the oak floors I had sanded myself, the fireplace where I used to read stories to Marcus, the kitchen where Martha used to hum while she baked peach cobbler. I wasn't crying for the house. A house is just wood and stone. I was crying for the betrayal. How could Marcus have let this happen? How could he have married a woman who would treat his father like a stray dog? He was weak, a voice inside me whispered. He was a good boy, but he was weak. And she ate him alive. I laid back on the bed, staring at the water stains on the ceiling. I closed my eyes, trying to sleep, trying to escape the reality of being 73 and destitute. Buzz. My phone vibrated on the nightstand. I ignored it. I didn't want to talk to anyone. I didn't want pity. Buzz. Buzz. It persisted. I reached over and picked it up. It was a text message. From Jessica. My stomach twisted. Why was she texting me? She had won. She had the house. She had the money. What more could she want? I opened the message. There was no text at first, just a picture. I squinted at the small screen, adjusting my glasses. The image loaded slowly on the motel's terrible Wi-Fi. When it cleared, I felt like someone had punched me in the gut. It was a photo taken from the driveway of my house. A tow truck was backed up onto the lawn. The heavy chains were hooked onto the bumper of a car. My car. My 1969 Ford Mustang Mach 1, candy apple red. I sat up, the phone shaking in my hand. That car wasn't just a vehicle. It was the only thing I had kept for myself after selling the company. I had bought it the year I came back from Vietnam. It was a wreck then. I had spent 5 years restoring it. Every bolt, every wire, every stitch in the leather seats was done by my hands. When Martha got sick, we used to take that car for drives on Sunday afternoons. She would tie a scarf around her hair, and we would drive with the windows down, pretending we were young again. That car held the ghost of my happiness. I scrolled down. Beneath the photo was a message from Jessica. "Sorry, Ray. The realtor said the garage needs to be empty for the open house tomorrow. This old thing was leaking oil on the epoxy floor. I called an auction house. They are picking it up now. Proceed, go to the estate. Maybe you can buy it back one day if you find a job." A job. She was mocking me. She knew I couldn't buy it back. She knew that car was worth $80,000 to a collector, but to me it was priceless. She was selling my memories to pay for her manicures. I stood up. The exhaustion vanished. The pain in my knees vanished. I looked at the time on the phone. 9:45 p.m. The auction yard she used, I knew the logo on the truck in the picture. Miller's Towing and Auction. They were located in the industrial district about 5 miles from here. They wouldn't process the car until morning. It would be sitting in their holding lot tonight. I looked at my reflection in the dirty motel mirror. An old man in a mud-stained suit. A man with $46 and no home. But as I looked closer, I saw something else. I saw the eyes of the man who had survived the Tet Offensive. I saw the eyes of the man who had built a construction empire from nothing. Jessica had made a mistake, a fatal mistake. She thought she was taking away my toy. She didn't realize she was taking away the last thing that kept me civilized. I grabbed my cane. I didn't need it for walking anymore. I needed it for breaking things. I wasn't going to let them sell that car, and I wasn't going to let Jessica sleep soundly in my house tonight. I walked out of room 104 into the rain. I didn't have a car to drive, so I started walking. 5 miles. I could do 5 miles. I had marched 20 miles with a rucksack on my back in the jungle. As I walked along the dark shoulder of the highway, cars splashing water on me as they passed, I started to formulate a plan. Jessica thought the law was on her side. She thought contracts and deeds were the only things that mattered. But I knew something she didn't. I knew how things worked. I knew how engines ran. I knew how pipes connected. And most importantly, I knew how to take them apart. She wanted to liquidate my life. Fine. but she was about to find out that some assets are volatile. I kept walking the lights of the impound lot glowing orange in the distance like a target. Tonight I was getting my car back. Or at least I was going to make sure no one else could ever drive it. And tomorrow. Tomorrow I would find that lawyer Sarah Cohen. If my son had left me a lifeline, I was going to find it, even if I had to drag it up from hell itself. The rain felt good now. It felt like baptism. The old Ray Bishop, the nice old grandfather who signed checks and stayed quiet, was dead. He died in that motel room. The man walking down the highway was someone else entirely, and he was coming for what was his. The 5-mile walk to the industrial district took me nearly 2 hours. My bad knee was throbbing with a dull, rhythmic ache that shot all the way up to my hip with every step. The rain had finally stopped, leaving the morning air thick with the smell of wet asphalt and diesel fumes. By the time I saw the chain-link fence of Miller's Towing and Auction, the sun was trying to push through the gray clouds, casting a weak, pale light on rows of shattered windshields and crumpled bumpers. I looked like a ghost. My suit was ruined, stained with mud and stiff from the dried rain. My shoes were scuffed. I hadn't shaved, and the white stubble on my chin made me look like the derelicts who pushed shopping carts under the overpass. Perfect. In a place like this, looking invisible was an advantage. The auction yard was already buzzing. It wasn't a high-end collector's auction with champagne and velvet ropes. This was where repo men and insurance adjusters came to offload their seizures. The crowd was a mix of greasy mechanics looking for parts, used car lot owners looking for a steal, and scrap dealers looking for metal. They were vultures circling the carcasses of other people's bad luck. I limped past the security guard at the gate. He barely glanced at me. He saw an old man with a cane, probably looking for a cheap sedan to get to the grocery store. He didn't see a saboteur. I found her immediately. My 1969 Mustang Mach 1 sat in the premium row right near the auction block, even covered in road spray from the tow truck that candy apple red paint shone like a beacon. She looked out of place among the dented Hondas and rusted pickups. She looked like a thoroughbred horse tied up in a pig pen. My heart squeezed in my chest. I had spent 3 years restoring that car. I knew every bolt. I knew the exact torque spec on the cylinder head bolts. I knew the smell of the vintage leather upholstery. I had rebuilt the 428 Cobra Jet engine on my workbench in the garage, polishing the ports until they were smooth as glass. I walked over to it, my hand trembling as I reached out to touch the cold metal of the fender. "Hey, old-timer," a voice boomed behind me. "You looking or buying?" I turned. It was a guy in a grease-stained jumpsuit holding a clipboard, one of the yard mechanics. "Just looking," I said, my voice raspy. "She is a beauty, isn't she?" "Yeah, she is," the mechanic grunted, spitting on the gravel. "Got dragged in last night. Widow said get rid of it fast." "Shame. Engine like that deserves to be run, not sold to some kid who is going to wrap it around a telephone pole." "Widow," I repeated. The word felt like a stone in my throat. "Yeah, some rich lady. She called 3 times this morning, screaming about the reserve price. Wants 50 grand minimum. Told her this ain't Barrett Jackson, but she wouldn't listen." He walked away to check a Toyota with a smashed front end. I was alone with the car. The auction was set to start in 20 minutes. The buyers were starting to drift toward the lane, kicking tires and popping hoods. This was the inspection period. It was now or never. I looked around. No cameras in this part of the yard. The mechanic was distracted. The crowd was focused on a Ford F-150 that was driving up the ramp. I leaned against the fender of the Mustang, pretending to rest my bad leg. My hand slipped under the front grille, finding the hood latch by memory. It clicked. I lifted the hood. There it was. The big V8 engine painted that classic Ford blue. It was a masterpiece of mechanical violence. I didn't have tools. I didn't need them. I had built this engine. I knew its secrets. I leaned in, shielding my actions with my body so anyone watching from the office would just think I was checking the oil. My hand snaked down to the distributor cap. It was an old-school setup. No computers, no electronic fuel injection, just pure mechanical fire. The distributor cap was held on by 2 spring clips. Snap, snap. I popped the cap off. Underneath was the rotor. A small piece of plastic and brass no bigger than my thumb. It was the heart of the ignition system. It spun around, sending the spark from the coil to the spark plugs. Without it, the engine would crank and crank until the battery died, but it would never fire. It would never run. I pulled the rotor off the shaft. It came loose with a soft pop. I slipped the small part into my pocket. Then I placed the distributor cap back on. I re-engaged the clips. Snap, snap. It looked perfect. To the untrained eye, everything was exactly where it should be. The spark plug wires were connected. The battery was hooked up. But mechanically, I had just lobotomized the car. I lowered the hood gently and latched it. "Run while you can, Jessica," I whispered to the cold metal, "because you are not going anywhere in this car." I moved back into the crowd, leaning heavily on my cane, pulling my collar up to hide my face. I found a spot near a stack of old tires where I could see the auction block but remain in the shadows. 10 minutes later, I saw a black Mercedes G-Wagon pull into the lot, splashing through a puddle. The door opened and Jessica stepped out. She looked ridiculous. She was wearing white pants and high heels in a salvage yard. She had oversized sunglasses on and she was holding a Starbucks cup like a shield. She looked at the grime around her with open disgust. She wasn't alone. She had brought her personal assistant, a nervous-looking young woman named Chloe, who was carrying a folder of documents. I watched them walk toward the auctioneer's podium. Jessica was gesturing aggressively, pointing at the Mustang. I could see her mouth moving. She was demanding top dollar. She was probably telling them that this car was a collector's item, a piece of American history. She was right, it was. But she didn't understand that value isn't just about the object, it is about the soul inside it. And I had just removed the soul. "Ladies and gentlemen," the auctioneer's voice boomed over the crackling PA system, "we have a special treat for you today. Lot number 42, a classic 1969 Ford Mustang Mach 1, fully restored, a real beast." The crowd murmured, heads turned. This was the star of the show. 2 yard workers jumped into the car to drive it onto the ramp. The auctioneer started his fast-paced chant. "We are looking for an opening bid of 30,000. 30,000. Who will give me 30? I see 30. Do I hear 35? This car runs like a dream, folks. A real pavement eater." The worker in the driver's seat turned the key. The sound of the starter motor whined through the yard. It was a strong, healthy crank. The engine turned over fast, but there was no explosion, no roar, no life. The auctioneer didn't stop. "She is cold, folks. She is just cold. Give her a second. Do I hear 35? The worker pumped the gas pedal. He turned the key again. Nothing. Just the hollow sound of metal spinning against metal. A ripple of laughter went through the crowd. "Sounds like a dead fuel pump," someone shouted. "Or a blown timing chain," another man yelled. "That is an expensive fix." I watched Jessica. She had frozen. Her hand was gripping her coffee cup so hard I thought it would burst. She took a step toward the ramp, shouting something at the driver. "Start it," she screamed. "I drove it yesterday. It works fine. Start the damn car." The driver tried again. He held the key down for 10 seconds straight. The starter motor began to whine in protest, getting slower and slower as the battery started to drain. Silence. The auctioneer's rhythm faltered. "Okay, folks. Looks like we have a little technical difficulty. Probably just a loose wire. But you can see the body is pristine. Who will give me 20,000? 20,000. The price had just dropped by half in 30 seconds. "I will give you $5,000 for the shell," a scrap dealer shouted from the back. $5,000. Jessica's head snapped toward the voice. She looked like she had been slapped. "No," she shrieked. "It is worth 80,000. Stop. Stop the bidding." The auctioneer sighed. "Ma'am, if it doesn't run, it is a non-runner. That is the policy. We sell as is." "I don't care," Jessica yelled, marching up the ramp in her high heels. "Someone sabotaged it. It was working. My father-in-law, She stopped. She scanned the crowd. Her eyes were wild, searching behind the sunglasses. She knew. And then she saw me. I hadn't moved. I was standing by the tire stack, leaning on my cane, looking straight at her. I didn't smile. I didn't wave. I just stood there, the ghost of the man she thought she had buried along with her husband. She pointed a manicured finger at me. "You!" she screamed. "You did this!" The crowd turned to look. Hundreds of eyes fell on the dirty old man in the corner. Jessica scrambled down the ramp, almost twisting her ankle. She marched toward me, her face twisted into a mask of pure rage. Her assistant tried to stop her, but Jessica shoved her away. She stopped 2 feet from me. I could smell her expensive perfume. It smelled like gardenias and greed. "What did you do?" she hissed, her voice trembling with fury. "It was working. I know it was working. You came here and you broke it." I looked at her calmly. I adjusted my grip on my cane. "I don't know what you are talking about, Jessica," I said. My voice was steady. "I am just here to watch. Is it a crime for an old man to watch an auction?" "Don't play games with me, Ray," she spat. "You tampered with the engine. I know you did. That is vandalism. That is destruction of property. I will have you arrested. I will have you thrown in jail so fast your head will spin." I chuckled. It was a dry, humorless sound. "Go ahead," I said. "Call the police. Tell them you are accusing a 73-year-old cripple of sabotaging a car in front of 50 witnesses without opening a toolbox. Tell them how I magically broke a steel engine with my bare hands." I leaned in closer. "Or maybe Jessica. Maybe the car just decided it didn't want to work for you. Machines have souls, you know. They know who loves them and who is just using them to pay off a credit card bill." She stared at me, her chest heaving. She was trapped. If she called the police, they would find nothing. I had no tools on me. The part was deep in my pocket, invisible. To the world, it was just an old car that wouldn't start. "Take the $5,000, I said softly. "Because that is all you are going to get, and the storage fees here are $50 a day." She looked back at the car, then at me. Her eyes narrowed into slits. "You think this is funny," she whispered. "You think you won a little victory. Keep laughing, Ray, because I am done playing nice. I was going to let you rot in a motel. But now I am going to bury you." She pulled out her phone. "Chloe," she barked at her assistant without looking away from me. "Pull the car from the auction. Pay the cancellation fee. I don't care what it costs. Just get it out of here, and call my lawyer. I want to file a civil suit against Raymond Bishop for malicious interference with an estate asset." She stepped closer, invading my personal space. "I am going to sue you for every penny you don't have, Ray. I am going to make sure that even your Social Security check comes to me. You want a war. You got one." She spun around and stomped back toward her Mercedes. I watched her go. My hand was in my pocket, fingers curled around the rotor. It was a small piece of plastic. But it was the first weapon I had fired in this war. The car was safe. For now. She wouldn't sell it for scrap, her ego wouldn't let her. She would tow it back to the house or a garage, hoping to fix it. That bought me time. But her threat hung in the air like smoke. She wasn't just going to ignore me anymore. She was coming for me. I turned to leave. The adrenaline was fading and the pain in my knee was coming back with a vengeance. I had saved the car, but I had poked the bear. I needed help. I needed an army. Or at least I needed a lawyer who wasn't afraid of bears. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the soggy business card again. Sarah Cohen. It was time to make the call. The rain had stopped by the time I made it back to the motel, but the storm inside my head was just getting started. I sat on the edge of the sagging mattress, my hands black with newsprint and grime. I hadn't just gone for a walk. I had gone on a reconnaissance mission. Before I returned to the motel, I had doubled back to the house. I knew the garbage truck schedule. Tuesday morning. That meant whatever Jessica had thrown out was still sitting in the bins at the end of the driveway. I had crept through the shadows of my own neighborhood, feeling like a criminal on the street I had lived on for 40 years. I didn't find Martha's urn. Jessica had probably smashed that just for spite. But I found something else. Resting on my lap was a thick black leather-bound notebook. It was Marcus's work diary. He had carried this thing everywhere since he took over the company. He used to sketch architectural details in it, cornice designs, structural load calculations. But as I opened it under the flickering fluorescent light of the motel room, I didn't see drawings. I saw numbers, columns and columns of red ink. April 4th. Jessica wants the kitchen redone. Italian marble. Cost $45,000. Cash flow is tight. I have to delay the vendor payments. May 10th. She booked a trip to the Maldives. First class. I told her we can't afford it. She called me a loser. She said her friends' husbands don't make them fly coach. I put it on the company credit card. June 2nd. The bank called. We are overdrawn. I had to let the insurance on the work trucks lapse. God, if Dad knew, he would kill me. I turned the pages, my heart hammering against my ribs. The handwriting, usually so neat and precise, became jagged and erratic as the dates got closer to the present. This wasn't a diary. It was a suicide note written in slow motion. August 15th. Took a loan from a private lender in the city. High interest. I had no choice. Jessica threatened to leave if I didn't buy the lake house. My chest hurts. It feels like a belt tightening around my ribs. I stopped breathing. The date of that entry was 2 days before he died. The coroner had said it was a massive stroke, natural causes. But reading these pages, I knew the truth. It wasn't natural. It was an execution. Jessica hadn't pulled a trigger. She hadn't used poison. She had used stress. She had used guilt. She had squeezed the life out of my son dollar by dollar, demand by demand, until his heart simply gave out under the weight of her greed. I closed the book. My hands were shaking not from age, but from a rage so cold it made me shiver. She killed him, I whispered to the empty room. She killed my boy for a marble kitchen and a vacation. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the chair watching the sun come up over the highway, plodding. At 8 a.m., I shaved with a disposable razor, put on my dirty suit, and caught a bus to the business district. I needed to see what was left of Bishop Construction. The building stood on a corner lot I had bought in 1985. It was a sturdy brick structure, honest and strong, just like the work we did. But as I approached, I stopped. The sign was gone. The hand-painted sign that said Bishop Construction Established 1980 was in a dumpster out front. In its place was a sleek modern banner made of frosted glass. J. Bishop Design and Living. J, not M for Marcus, not B for Bishop. J for Jessica. I walked through the front door. The lobby, which used to smell like fresh coffee and sawdust, now smelled like lavender and pretension. The walls were painted a stark clinical white. The photos of our completed projects, the bridges, the community centers, the low-income housing we were proud of, were gone. Behind the reception desk sat a girl who couldn't have been more than 20. She was typing on a laptop, wearing headphones. "Can I help you?" she asked, without looking up, her voice bored. "I am here to see Jessica," I said. She finally looked at me. Her eyes scanned my mud-stained suit, my cane, my tired face. She wrinkled her nose. "Ms. Bishop is in a meeting. Do you have an appointment?" "We are not hiring janitorial staff at the moment." Janitorial staff. I leaned over the desk. "My name is Raymond Bishop. I built this building. I hired the person who hired you. Tell her I am here." The girl blinked, looking unsure. Before she could answer, the door to the main conference room opened. A group of people walked out. But they weren't the clients I expected. They were my men. There was Big Mike, my foreman for 20 years. A giant of a man with hands like shovels and a heart of gold. Beside him was Jamal, the master electrician, and old Henry, the best Finnish carpenter in the state. They were all carrying cardboard boxes. They looked defeated, shoulders slumped, heads down. Big Mike was wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. "Mike," I called out. Mike looked up. When he saw me, his face crumbled. "Mr. Ray," he choked out. I limped over to them. "What is going on? Why do you have boxes? She fired us." "Ray," Mike said, his voice trembling. "All of us. Said she is restructuring. Said our hourly rates were too high and we didn't fit the new corporate image." I looked at the group. There were 12 of them, all seasoned veterans, all loyal, and I realized with a sick feeling in my stomach, all black. I looked past them into the conference room. Jessica was standing there pointing at a blueprint. Surrounding her were 3 young men in skinny suits looking like they had never held a hammer in their lives. They were nodding enthusiastically at whatever nonsense she was spouting. "She replaced us with agency kids," Jamal spat, glaring at the room. "Cheap labor. Don't know a joist from a jam. She told me my dreadlocks were unprofessional for the new clientele she wants to attract. The racism wasn't even subtle. It was corporate, sanitized, and brutal. She wasn't just firing employees, she was erasing the culture of the company. She was whitewashing my legacy. I felt the blood rushing in my ears. I pushed past Mike. "Mr. Ray, don't..." Mike grabbed my arm gently. "She has security." "Let go, Mike," I said softly. I walked into the conference room. The chatter stopped. Jessica looked up. Her eyes widened for a fraction of a second, then narrowed into that familiar look of disdain. "Ray," she sighed. "I thought I made it clear. You are not welcome on my properties." "Your properties," I said, my voice echoing in the glass-walled room. "You haven't laid a single brick in your life. I am the CEO," she said, crossing her arms, "and I am pivoting the business model. Construction is dirty, low-margin work. We are moving into high-end interior design and lifestyle consulting. That is where the money is. You are firing the people who built this company, I said, pointing to the men standing in the hallway. Men who have families, men who knew Marcus since he was a boy. They are obsolete, she said coldly, and expensive. I can get recent graduates to do the design work for half the cost. And as for the manual labor, we will subcontract to the lowest bidder. It is called efficiency, Ray. Look it up. I looked at the young men around her. They were looking at me like I was a dinosaur. You are not pivoting, I said, stepping closer. You are looting. I found the diary, Jessica. The room went dead silent. Jessica's face went pale beneath her makeup. What did you say? I found Marcus's notebook, I said, holding her gaze. I know about the loans. I know about the threats. I know you bled him dry until his heart stopped. You didn't just inherit this company. You stole it over his dead body. She stepped forward, her hands clenched. Get out, now, or I will call the police again. And this time I will tell them you threatened my life. Call them. I challenged her. Let's show them the books. Let's show them the personal expenses charged to the corporate account. She laughed, a high brittle sound. Go ahead, Ray. Who are they going to believe, the grieving widow trying to save a failing business, or the senile homeless old man ranting about conspiracies? I have the lawyers. I have the accountants. I have the paperwork. You have nothing. She walked over to the door and held it open. Leave, and take your charity cases with you, she said, gesturing to Mike and the others. I stood there for a long moment. I wanted to tear the room apart. I wanted to smash the glass table, but I saw the security guard coming down the hall, hand on his taser. I wasn't going to win this with fists. I turned and walked out. I stopped by Big Mike. Don't go far, Mike, I said quietly. What do you mean, boss? He asked. I mean, don't take another job yet, I said. This isn't over. She thinks she stripped the company of its assets, but the assets are standing right here in this hallway. I looked at the crew. I don't have money to pay you today, I told them. But if you trust me, if you trust the name Bishop, I need you to wait. I am going to take it back. All of it. Mike straightened up. He looked at the others. They nodded. We are with you, Mr. Ray, Mike said. We built it once. We can build it again. I walked out of the building into the bright sunlight. I didn't have a company. I didn't have a home. But I had an army. And I had the diary. Now I just needed to find the one person who could turn that diary into a weapon. I pulled the soggy business card out of my pocket. Sarah Cohen. It was time to go to war. I walked into O'Malley's pub on 4th Street. It wasn't the kind of place Jessica or her new designer friends would ever set foot in. The floor was sticky with spilled beer, the air smelled of fried onions and old tobacco, and the jukebox was playing a Johnny Cash song that sounded like it was coming from the bottom of a well. This was where the real work of the city happened. This was where the men who poured the concrete, wired the skyscrapers, and unclogged the sewers came to wash the dust out of their throats. I spotted them in the back booth. Big Mike, Jamal, Henry, and about 6 others. They looked like a defeated army. Shoulders slumped, beers untouched, staring at the scarred wood of the table. These were men who defined themselves by what they built. Jessica had taken that away from them. I didn't limp this time. I walked straight to the table and slammed my hand down on the wood. Gentlemen, I said, why do you look like you are at a funeral? Big Mike looked up. His face was heavy with worry. Mr. Ray, we were just talking about you. We heard about the house. We heard she kicked you out. News travels fast in the trades, I said, pulling up a chair. Yes, she kicked me out. She stole my home. She fired you. She thinks she has won because she has the checkbook and the lawyers. I looked around the table. I saw anger in their eyes. Good. Anger is fuel. But she forgot one thing, I continued, leaning in. She forgot who keeps this city running. She thinks houses maintain themselves. She thinks lights turn on by magic. She thinks toilets flush because of good intentions. Jamal cracked a smile. He was twirling a screwdriver between his fingers. She called the new agency electricians today, he said. They didn't know where the breaker panel was. They called me asking for a schematic. I told them to ask the interior designer. The table erupted in laughter. It was a grim, hard laughter, but it was a start. I don't have money to pay you right now, I said, my voice dropping low. I can't promise you overtime. I can't even promise you a lunch break. But I have a job for you. What is the job? Boss Henry asked, leaning forward. We are going to be the ghosts in the machine, I said. We are going to watch her. Every move she makes. every person she talks to, and when she tries to sell my house, we are going to make sure that house fights back." Big Mike nodded slowly. He extended a hand the size of a baseball mitt. "We are in, Ray. We don't want money. We want payback." The network we set up was unlike anything Jessica could have imagined. She relied on security cameras and alarm systems. We relied on people. The mailman, a guy named Tony I had known for 20 years, told us every time a legal letter arrived at the house. The landscape crew who Jessica had fired, but who still talked to the new guys, let us know when she was leaving. The barista at the coffee shop down the street, whose father used to work for me, told us who she was meeting. We knew her schedule better than she did. 2 days later, the sign went up. "For sale, luxury estate." I parked my borrowed truck down the street, watching through a pair of binoculars. It hurt to see that sign. It felt like someone had put a price tag on my memories. Jessica had staged the house perfectly. She had removed all the family photos. She had painted over the warm beige walls with a cold, sterile gray. She had rented modern furniture that looked uncomfortable and expensive. She was hosting an exclusive open house for high-net-worth buyers. I saw the cars arriving: Porsches, Teslas, Range Rovers. These were people with money to burn looking for a trophy home. I picked up the walkie-talkie. "Status?" I asked. I heard Jamal's voice, static-filled but clear. "I am in position at the utility pole. Just say the word." "And the water?" I asked. Big Mike answered. "I found the main valve access in the back alley. The new plumbers she hired used PVC instead of copper for the repair. Amateurs." I put a little pressure on the junction. "It is holding, for now." "Wait for the signal," I said. I watched Jessica greet a couple in the driveway. The man was wearing a suit that probably cost more than my first house. The woman was pointing at the landscaping, looking critical. Jessica was beaming, using that fake, charming laugh that used to fool my son. They walked inside. I waited. I let them get comfortable. I let Jessica start her pitch. I imagined her standing in the grand foyer, pointing out the chandelier, talking about the flow of the space. Now I whispered into the radio. Inside the house, chaos was about to unleash, but it wasn't random. It was calculated. Jamal didn't cut the power. That would be too obvious. Instead, he created a harmonic resonance in the line. He loosened the neutral wire at the transformer just enough to create a voltage drop when a heavy load was applied. I saw the lights in the living room window flicker. Not a blink, a strobe effect. On, off, dim, bright. It looked like the house was possessed. Then came the water. Big Mike had bypassed the pressure regulator. The city water pressure was usually 60 pounds per square inch. He cranked it to 100. I couldn't hear the sound from the street, but I knew what it sounded like. The pipes in the walls would start to sing, a high-pitched whine that would vibrate through the floorboards. And then the weak point in the upstairs bathroom, the one Jessica had rushed to renovate with cheap labor, gave way. Suddenly, the front door burst open. The rich couple ran out looking horrified. The woman was checking her hair. The man was shaking his head, looking back at the house with disgust. Jessica ran out after them, waving her hands. "Wait," she screamed. "It is just a minor glitch. We can fix it. I will knock 10,000 off the price." The man turned around. He didn't look happy. "Lady," he shouted, "the toilet just exploded like a geyser. The lights are giving my wife a seizure. This place is a money pit. You couldn't pay me to live here." They got in their car and sped away. Jessica stood in the driveway, humiliated. She looked at the house. The lights were still flickering maniacally. Water was starting to seep out from under the garage door. I lowered the binoculars. I didn't smile. It wasn't funny. I was hurting my own house. I was damaging the thing I loved. But it was like breaking a bone to reset it properly. I had to make the house toxic. I had to make it unsellable. Another car pulled up. Another potential buyer. Before they could even get out, the garage door started opening and closing on its own, banging loudly against the frame. Jamal was having fun with the frequency jammer. The car paused, reversed, and drove away. Jessica screamed. I saw her throw her clipboard onto the wet grass. She pulled out her phone and started yelling at someone, probably the new contractor, the one who didn't know that the wiring in that house had a soul, and that soul answered only to me. I picked up the radio. "Good work, gentlemen," I said. "Pull back. We don't want to be seen. We are ghosts, Ray," Big Mike said. "We were never here." I drove away, leaving Jessica alone with a house that was rebelling against her, but the victory was short-lived. That night back at the motel, Big Mike came to my door. He didn't look happy. "What is it?" I asked, letting him in. Ray, he said, twisting his cap in his hands. I heard something today. From a buddy who works at the city records office. What did you hear? Jessica isn't just selling the house, he said. She is trying to fast-track the probate. She filed an emergency motion claiming the estate is insolvent. She wants to liquidate everything by Friday. Friday. That was 3 days away. And there is more, Mike added. She is meeting with a developer tomorrow. Not a home buyer. A developer. They are talking about tearing it down. My blood ran cold. Tearing it down. She wants to sell the land, Mike said quietly. She knows the house is having issues. So she figures the lot is worth more without the structure. She is going to bulldoze it, Ray. I sat down heavily on the bed. I had made the house unsellable to a family, so now she was selling it to a wrecking ball. I had underestimated her ruthlessness. She didn't care about the architecture. She didn't care about the history. She just wanted the check. I looked at the diary on the nightstand. I looked at the business card. Sabotage wasn't enough. Pranks weren't enough. I needed to stop her legally. I needed to freeze her out before the bulldozers arrived. Mike, I said, standing up, get some sleep. Tomorrow we are not fixing pipes. Tomorrow we are going to break into a fortress. What fortress? Mike asked. My house, I said. There is a safe in the study. And if the diary is right, the only thing that can stop her is locked inside it. Mike grinned. A slow, dangerous grin. I will bring the crowbar, he said. No, I said. No crowbars. We are going in through the front door, but first we need a distraction big enough to make the police look the other way. I looked out the window at the city lights. Jessica wanted to play dirty. She wanted to treat people like trash and houses like assets. She was about to find out what happens when the trash fights back. I was sitting on the edge of the bed in room 104, cleaning the contact points of a spark plug I had salvaged from the junkyard. It was a mindless task, something to keep my hands busy while my brain played 4D chess against a woman who wanted me dead. It was 10 in the morning on a Thursday. The sun was trying to push through the grimy curtains, but the room still felt like a cave. Then came the knock. It wasn't the housekeeping knock, it wasn't the pizza delivery knock, it was a firm, authoritative 3-rap knock, the kind of knock that comes with a badge or a warrant. I didn't panic. Panic is for people who haven't spent 13 months in the jungle listening for snapping twigs. I slid the spark plug into my pocket and grabbed my cane. Who is it? I called out. My voice was steady. Mr. Bishop, a man's voice answered. My name is David Sterling. I am with Adult Protective Services. I need you to open the door. My heart didn't skip a beat. It stopped cold. Adult Protective Services. Jessica. I knew exactly what this was. I opened the door. Standing there was a man in his 40s wearing a cheap suit that looked like he had slept in it. He held a clipboard in one hand and a heavy leather briefcase in the other. He looked tired. He looked like a man who spent his days wading through human misery. Mr. Sterling, I said, stepping back to let him in. To what do I owe the pleasure? He walked in, his eyes scanning the room immediately. He was looking for signs, liquor bottles, filth, confusion. He saw the made bed. He saw the small stack of books on the nightstand. He saw the spark plugs lined up neatly on a towel. Mr. Bishop, I have received an emergency petition filed regarding your welfare, he said, pulling a file from his case. The petitioner, a Mrs. Jessica Bishop, claims that you are suffering from advanced dementia. She states that you have been wandering the streets, that you have become aggressive, and that you are living in squalor. He looked around the motel room. It was cheap, yes, but it was spotless. I had scrubbed the bathroom floor on my hands and knees the night before. Squalor is a strong word, I said calmly. I would call it economical. Mr. Sterling didn't smile. He flipped a page. The petition grants temporary emergency guardianship to Mrs. Bishop pending an evaluation. She has arranged for your transfer to the Shady Pines Assisted Living Facility. She claims you are a danger to yourself and others. I am here to transport you. Shady Pines. I knew the place. It was a warehouse for the forgotten, a place where the state dumped the indigent elderly to be medicated into silence. It smelled of urine and bleach. People went in, but they never came out. She doesn't want to help me, Mr. Sterling, I said, sitting down in the single chair. She wants to silence me. Sterling sighed. He took a pen out of his pocket. Look, Mr. Bishop, I hear this every day. Everyone thinks they are fine. But if you are living in a motel after being evicted from your family home that raises red flags, I have a job to do. I need to ask you some standard questions to assess your cognitive orientation. I folded my hands on my lap. I looked him dead in the eye. Ask your questions, son. What is the date today? He asked Penn, hovering over the paper. Today is Thursday, October 12th, 2023, I said. It is 62 degrees outside. The humidity is 40%. And the Detroit Lions are playing the Buccaneers this Sunday. Sterling blinked. He wrote it down. Who is the current president of the United States? I answered him. Then I added, and the vice president, and the Speaker of the House. He frowned. Okay. Can you count backward from 100 by sevens? 100, 93, 86, 79, 72, 65. I didn't stop. I kept going, my voice rhythmic, precise like a metronome. I stopped at 2. Sterling put the pen down. He looked at me, really looked at me for the first time. Mr. Bishop, you seem very lucid. I am not just lucid. Mr. Sterling, I said, leaning forward. I am a retired structural engineer. I ran a construction company for 30 years. My mind is my tool. And right now, that tool is telling me that you are being used as a weapon. I reached for the file on his lap. Can I see the petition? He hesitated, then handed it to me. I scanned the legal jargon. It was a masterpiece of lies. Jessica claimed I had left the stove on. She claimed I spoke to people who weren't there. She claimed I had forgotten my own son's name at the funeral. But then I saw it. The clause at the bottom, the one attached to the power of attorney document I had signed 5 years ago when I sold the company. In the event of incapacitation, the guardian assumes full control of all assets, including real estate holdings, to cover the cost of care. I looked up at Sterling. Tell me, David, I said, using his first name. If I go to Shady Pines today, what happens to my assets? The state takes control, or your guardian liquidates them to pay for the facility, he said. It is standard procedure. And if I am declared incompetent today, can I legally stop the sale of a property, I asked? No, he said. You would lose legal standing. I stood up. I walked over to the nightstand and picked up the folder of documents I had printed at the library that morning. Jessica is trying to sell my house, David. My house, the one I built. She has a developer lined up to bulldoze it, but she can't sell it quickly if I am fighting the probate. Unless you are out of the way. Sterling finished the sentence. He looked at the papers I handed him. It was the listing for the house, and the text messages printed out where she threatened to bury me. She isn't worried about my memory, I said. She is worried about my memory. She is worried that I remember too much. I remember where the money went. I remember how she bullied my son. And I remember that this power of attorney was signed under the condition that she and Marcus would care for me in my home. Not in a motel. And certainly not in Shady Pines. Sterling looked at the cheap motel room. He looked at my suit, which was clean and pressed despite the circumstances. He looked at the spark plugs arranged by size. This man wasn't looking at a dementia patient. He was looking at a man who was organized, disciplined, and fighting for his life. He closed the file. He clicked his pen. Mr. Bishop, he said slowly, in my professional opinion, you are oriented to time, place, and person. You show no signs of cognitive decline. In fact, you seem sharper than most people half your age. He stood up. However, your living situation is precarious. You are homeless. That gives her leverage. I am not homeless, I said. I am between residences. And I have resources. I didn't tell him my resources were a group of angry construction workers and a jar of change. Sterling sighed. He pulled a card out of his pocket. I'm going to mark this petition as unfounded, he said. I will write in my report that the allegations appear to be motivated by a financial dispute that will kill her guardianship application. For now, he walked to the door. But Ray, he said, turning back, she won't stop. If she can't lock you up, she will try to starve you out. She controls the bank accounts. How are you eating? I smiled. It was a grim smile. I am a Marine, David. We know how to survive on MREs and rainwater. I will be fine. You just keep her off my back. He nodded and left. I locked the door behind him and leaned against it, letting out a breath I had been holding for 20 minutes. My hands were shaking, not from fear but from the adrenaline crash. It had been close, too close. If I had stuttered, if I had been messy, if I had shown 1 ounce of weakness, I would be in a van right now, heading to a place where people go to die. Jessica had tried to take my freedom. That was a declaration of total war. She wanted to play the medical card fine. I could play doctor, too. I went back to the bed and picked up Marcus's diary. I turned to the back pages, the pages I hadn't shown anyone yet. Marcus had written down numbers, not just financial numbers, prescription numbers, Jessica's meds, Xanax, Adderall, oxycodone. She mixes them. She gets them from 3 different doctors. I ran my finger over the ink. "You called me crazy, Jessica," I whispered. "You tried to put me in a straitjacket, but it looks like you are the one with the chemical dependency." I grabbed my phone. I needed to call Sarah Cohen again. We needed to file a countermotion, but not just for the money. We were going to file for a drug test. If she was the executor of the estate, she had to be of sound mind. And if I could prove she was high when she signed those eviction papers, everything she did would be null and void. I put on my jacket. I wasn't hiding in the motel anymore. I was going to the courthouse. And I was going to bring the whole damn building down on her head. The social worker, David Sterling, had given me a reprieve, but I knew it was temporary. I was living on borrowed time in a motel room that smelled of stale tobacco and desperation. To keep Jessica from throwing me into that nursing home, I had to prove I wasn't just a senile old man. I had to prove I had assets. I had to prove I had a future. I spent the next 48 hours doing something I hadn't done since I was auditing my own company's books back in the 90s. I turned that motel room into a war room. The bed was covered in papers, bank statements, tax returns, old invoices, anything I had managed to salvage from the glove compartment of my truck or printed out at the public library. My eyes were burning. The reading glasses I'd bought at the drugstore for $5 were pinching the bridge of my nose, but I couldn't stop. I was looking for a miracle in a haystack of numbers. I was tracing the history of the joint account before Jessica froze it. I wanted to see where the money had gone. I knew she was spending it on clothes and trips, but I needed to know if there was anything left, anything she had missed. That was when I saw it. It was a transaction from 18 months ago, a transfer of $5,000. I ran my finger down the page. There it was again the following month, and the month after that. Every single month on the 15th, my son Marcus had transferred $5,000 to an entity listed only as Project Phoenix LLC. I sat back, rubbing my tired eyes. $5,000 a month. That was $60,000 a year. Over 18 months, that was nearly $100,000. My stomach turned over. The first thought that hit me was the one every parent dreads. Drugs. Was Marcus an addict? Was that why he died of a stroke at 40? Had the stress driven him to pills, and was this his dealer? No. I shook my head. Marcus didn't have the look of a junkie. He was tired, yes. Stressed, yes. But his eyes were clear. Then came the second thought. A woman. A mistress. Was Project Phoenix some high-end apartment for a girlfriend? Was he paying hush money? If that was true, then Jessica was right. My son was a liar and a cheat, and I was fighting for the memory of a man I didn't even know. I felt a wave of nausea. I wanted to close the folder. I wanted to stop looking. Ignorance would have been easier. But I am Ray Bishop. I don't run from the truth, even if it hurts. I grabbed my cane and my jacket. I needed to know what Project Phoenix was. I took the bus downtown to the county clerk's office. It was a gray, imposing building where dreams went to be filed in triplicate. I limped through the metal detectors and found a computer terminal in the public records section. My fingers felt thick and clumsy on the keyboard. I wasn't good with these machines, but I knew how to search for a business license. I typed in PROJECTPHOENIX LLC. The screen buffered. The little hourglass spun around and around, mocking my patience. Then the results popped up. Project Phoenix LLC. Registered agent Marcus Bishop. Okay, so he owned it. It wasn't a dealer. It wasn't a pimp. It was him. I clicked on the address. It was listed as a P.O. box at a UPS store 3 towns over. That was strange. Marcus had a prime office downtown. Why would he register a company to a strip mall mailbox 20 miles away? I scrolled down to the filing purpose. Real estate holding and asset management. Real estate. My heart started to beat faster. Marcus was an architect. Maybe he was flipping houses on the side. Maybe he was trying to build a nest egg away from Jessica's prying eyes. I clicked on the Assets tab. The screen refreshed, And there, listed under the holdings of Project Phoenix LLC, was a single entry. It was a purchase agreement, dated 2 years ago. I leaned in closer, squinting at the screen. I couldn't believe what I was reading. Project Phoenix LLC had purchased the secondary mortgage lien on a property. The property address was 4215 Oak Street. My house. I sat back in the hard plastic chair, my mouth open. The air in the room felt suddenly thin. My house had a mortgage. I knew that. When I signed the house over to Marcus 5 years ago, he had taken out a loan against it to pay off the company's tax debts. That was part of the deal. Jessica knew about that loan. That was why she said she had to sell the house to pay the bank. But this document said something different. It said that the bank had sold the debt. And the buyer wasn't another bank. It was Marcus. My son had been using that secret fund to buy his own debt. He was paying the mortgage, yes, but he was paying it to himself, to this shell company. Why would he do that? And then the pieces clicked together, the genius of it, the desperation of it. If Jessica filed for divorce, she would get half of everything. She would get half the house. But if the house was drowning in debt to a third-party company, it would look worthless on paper. She wouldn't want it. Marcus was stripping the equity out of the house and hiding it in Project Phoenix to protect it from her. He was building a firewall. But there was more. I clicked on the Articles of Incorporation. I needed to know who the beneficiary was. If Marcus was dead and he owned the LLC, then Jessica inherited the LLC, which meant she inherited the debt and the house. It would be a circle that led right back to her. I scrolled to the bottom of the PDF. In the event of the death of the primary member, control of Project Phoenix LLC and all its assets shall transfer immediately and irrevocably to the secondary member. My finger hovered over the screen. Who was the secondary member? I scrolled down. Name: Sarah Cohen. Title: Trustee. Sarah Cohen. The lawyer. The name on the business card. I let out a breath that sounded like a sob. He didn't trust Jessica. He knew. My God, he knew she was a predator. He couldn't divorce her. Maybe she had something on him, or maybe he was just too scared. But he had built a life raft. He had spent 2 years siphoning money away, $5,000 at a time, to ensure that if anything happened to him, the house wouldn't belong to Jessica. It would belong to this company. And this company was controlled by a lawyer he trusted. Project Phoenix. Rising from the ashes. He meant for me to find this. Or maybe he meant for Sarah to find me. I printed the documents. All of them. The printer whirred and spat out the warm pages. I held them against my chest like they were gold bars. This was it. This was the smoking gun. Jessica thought she owned the house. She thought she was the executor of the estate. But she didn't know that the estate didn't own the house. A ghost company did. And she didn't own the ghost company. I walked out of the county clerk's office into the bright afternoon sun. For the first time since the funeral, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like a father who had just discovered that his son was a hero. Marcus hadn't been weak. He had been playing a long, silent game of chess against a woman who slept in his bed. He had been trying to save the one thing that mattered, his father's legacy. I checked my watch. It was 2 p.m. I took out the soggy business card again. Sarah Cohen. I didn't need to wonder if I should call her anymore. I needed to get to her office before Jessica sold the land to that developer. If Jessica signed a contract to sell that house, she would be selling property she didn't legally own. That wasn't just a civil dispute. That was fraud. That was a felony. I hailed a taxi. I couldn't afford it, but I didn't care. I would walk to Sarah Cohen's office if I had to. Driver, I said, climbing into the back seat. Take me to the financial district, and step on it. As the taxi weaved through traffic, I looked at the papers in my lap. You did good, son, I whispered. You did good. Now let your old man finish the job. But as the skyline of the city passed by, a cold thought crept in. Why hadn't Sarah Cohen contacted me? If she was the trustee, she should have known Marcus was dead. She should have stepped in, unless she didn't know yet, or unless Jessica had gotten to her too. Trust no one. That was the rule of the jungle. I gripped my cane. I was walking into a lawyer's office with a stack of stolen papers and a theory. I hoped Sarah Cohen was as honest as Marcus thought she was, because if she wasn't, I was handing the only weapon I had to the enemy. The law office of Sarah Cohen was not in a glass skyscraper downtown. It was in a converted brownstone on the edge of the historic district, a building with ivy climbing the red bricks and a heavy oak door that looked like it could withstand a siege. I stood on the sidewalk smoothing down the front of my wrinkled suit. I looked like a vagrant trying to sell encyclopedias, but I felt like a man holding a loaded gun. The file folder from the county clerk was tucked tight under my arm. I didn't have an appointment. I didn't care. I pushed open the door. A bell chimed softly. The reception area smelled of lemon polish and old books. A young woman looked up from her desk. She had kind eyes, not the shark-like stare of the receptionist at Jessica's office. "Can I help you, sir?" she asked. "My name is Raymond Bishop," I said, my voice raspy from the dust of the city. "I need to see Sarah Cohen. Tell her I am here about Project Phoenix." The receptionist's eyes went wide. She didn't ask me to sit down. She didn't ask for ID. She simply picked up the phone, pressed a button, and whispered 3 words. "He is here." A moment later, the door to the inner office opened. A woman stepped out. She was in her late 40s, wearing a sensible navy suit and reading glasses perched on the end of her nose. She didn't look like a corporate raider. She looked like a librarian who knew martial arts. "Mr. Bishop," she said softly. Her voice trembled just a little. "I have been praying you would walk through that door." She ushered me into her office and closed the door, locking it. She motioned for me to sit in a leather chair that felt too comfortable for a man who had been sleeping on a motel mattress. I put the folder on her desk. "My son," I said, getting straight to the point. "He came to see you." Sarah sat down, folding her hands on the desk. She looked at me with a mixture of sadness and intense respect. "Marcus came to see me 2 years ago, Ray. Can I call you Ray? He talked about you constantly. He called you his North Star." I swallowed hard, fighting the lump in my throat. If I was his North Star, why did he let me get lost in the dark? "He didn't have a choice," Sarah said, as if reading my mind. She opened a drawer and pulled out a bottle of water, sliding it across to me. "Marcus was a brilliant architect, Ray, but he was a terrible judge of character when it came to romance. He fell in love with a predator. By the time he realized what Jessica was, he was already married, and she had her claws deep into his finances. She threatened him," I said. "I read the diary." Sarah nodded. "Worse than that, she threatened you." "Me?" I asked. Sarah sighed, taking off her glasses. "About 18 months ago, Marcus found out that Jessica was diverting company funds to a private offshore account. He confronted her. She told him that if he tried to divorce her, she would allege that the construction company, your company, Ray, had been cutting corners for decades. She threatened to destroy your reputation. She said she would plant evidence that would send you to prison for building code violations." My hands clenched the arms of the chair. She would destroy his father to keep her lifestyle. "Marcus couldn't risk that," Sarah continued. "He knew you were innocent, but he knew how the media works. A scandal would kill you. So he decided to play a different game. He pretended to be the submissive husband. He pretended to give her everything. But secretly, he started building a firewall." "Project Phoenix," I whispered. "Exactly." Sarah opened a file on her desk. It was thick. "He started siphoning his own salary into the LLC. He bought the debt on the house so that if she tried to take it in a divorce, she would end up with nothing but liability. But he knew that wasn't enough. He knew that if he died, she would be the executor. She would have the power to evict you." "She did evict me," I said bitterly. "She threw me out in the rain on the day of his funeral." "I know," Sarah said, her eyes flashing with anger. "I sent you 3 letters, Ray, certified mail, warning you about her, warning you to come see me immediately after the funeral. I never got them," I said. "Of course not." Jessica intercepted them. As executor, she has control of the mail. She probably burned them. Sarah leaned forward, her expression intense. "But Marcus prepared for that too. He knew she would try to erase you. So, he wrote a codicil." "Do you know what that is?" "An amendment to a will," I said. "Yes. But this wasn't just an amendment. It was a failsafe. A poison pill." Sarah pulled a document from the file. It was a photocopy. "This is a draft," she said. "Listen to this clause. It is called the Kinship Protection Clause." She began to read aloud. "I, Marcus Bishop, being of sound mind, do hereby declare that my primary bequest of the family estate and assets to my wife, Jessica Bishop, is conditional. This inheritance is contingent upon the continued residence and care of my father, Raymond Bishop, within the primary family home. If at any time my father is involuntarily removed, evicted, or placed in a facility against his will, or if the property is sold without his express written consent, the entirety of my estate shall bypass my wife and transfer immediately to the Phoenix Trust with Raymond Bishop as the sole beneficiary. The room went silent. The only sound was the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. He knew I whispered. He knew she would do this. He counted on it, Sarah said. He knew her greed was stronger than her patience. He knew she wouldn't wait. He set a trap, Ray. And by kicking you out, she just stepped right onto the trigger. I felt a tear roll down my cheek. I didn't wipe it away. My son hadn't abandoned me. He had turned himself into a shield protecting me from beyond the grave. So we have her, I said, a fierce hope rising in my chest. We take this to the judge. We show him the clause. We throw her out. Sarah didn't smile. She looked down at the desk. It is not that simple, Ray. Why not? I demanded. You are the lawyer. You have the document. I have a draft, Sarah said, tapping the paper. I have a digital copy on my server. But in this state, for a testamentary document to override a registered will, especially one that disinherits a spouse, the court requires the original, the wet ink signature, the one with the notary's seal. Where is it? I asked. Sarah looked at me. It is in the house, I repeated. Marcus didn't trust me to keep it, she explained. He was afraid Jessica would raid my office. She has powerful lawyers who could subpoena my files, so Marcus hid the original in the one place he knew she never looked. Where? I asked again. In his study, Sarah said. Behind the built-in bookshelf, there is a wall safe, not the main safe in the master bedroom that she knows about, a hidden one. I nodded. I knew the study. I had built those bookshelves, but I didn't know about a safe. He installed it himself 2 weeks before he died, Sarah said. He sent me a picture of the location, but he never sent me the combination. He said he would give it to me when the time was right. Then he had the stroke. She looked at me helplessly. We need that document, Ray. Without the original, Jessica's lawyers will argue that the digital copy was just a draft he never intended to sign. They will say it is a forgery. They will bury us in paperwork for 10 years while she sells the land and spends the money. So we need to get into the house, I said. Yes. And we need to open a safe that we don't have the combination for. Yes. And we need to do it before she sells the property to the developer on Friday. Sarah nodded grimly. That is the situation. I sat back in the chair. I started to laugh. It was a dry, rasping laugh. What is so funny? Sarah asked. My son, I said. He was a genius architect, but he forgot that his father isn't a safecracker. He left the treasure locked in a box inside a fortress controlled by the enemy. I looked at Sarah. If we break in, we are committing a crime. Technically, yes, Sarah said. But if we find that the house belongs to you, you can't be arrested for breaking into your own home. But if we fail, I go to jail. I finished, and she wins. I stood up. I picked up the photocopy of the draft. I looked at Marcus's signature at the bottom. It was strong and confident. I built that house, Sarah, I said. I know every nail. I know every hollow space in the walls. If there is a safe, I can find it. And if there is a combination... I paused. A memory flashed in my mind. The day Marcus and I went fishing when he was 10. The day I taught him how to use a protractor. The day he graduated. Marcus wouldn't have chosen a random number. He would have chosen something that only 2 people in the world would know. Him and me. I think I can open it, I said. Sarah stood up. She looked at me with a fierce determination. I can't go with you, Ray. I am an officer of the court. I can't be an accomplice to a break-in, but I can be ready. She handed me a business card with a cell phone number on the back. Once you have the document, call me. Day or night, I will have a judge on standby for an emergency injunction. But Ray, be careful. Jessica has private security patrolling the grounds now. If they catch you... They won't catch me, I said, putting the card in my pocket. I am not going in as a thief. I am going in as a father. I walked to the door. Ray, Sarah called out. I turned back. Get our boy back, she said softly. I nodded and walked out into the cool evening air. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over the city. I had a team. I had a target. And now I had the key. I pulled out my burner phone and dialed Big Mike. "Mike," I said when he answered, "tell the boys to get their black hoodies. We are going home." It was raining again. It seemed like the sky had been crying ever since Marcus died, or maybe it was just trying to wash the filth off the house. I sat in the cab of Big Mike's truck, the wipers slapping back and forth like a metronome counting down the seconds to a disaster. We were parked 3 houses down, shrouded in the shadows of an old oak tree I had planted myself 30 years ago. Beside me, Big Mike was checking a flashlight. In the back seat, Jamal was nervously tapping his fingers on his knee. We looked like a crew of bank robbers, except our combined age was over 200 years and our weapons were a pry bar and a ring of master keys. "Look at that," Mike grunted, pointing through the windshield. "Just look at that disrespect." I looked. My house, no Jessica's asset, was lit up like a Christmas tree in July. Purple and pink lights were blasting from the windows. The bass from the music was so loud I could feel it vibrating in the dashboard of the truck. Cars were lined up all along the street. Expensive cars. Ferraris, Lamborghinis, G-Wagons. "She is throwing a party," I whispered. "A party? It hasn't even been a week since the funeral. It is a networking event," Jamal said from the back, his voice dripping with disgust. "I heard the catering van driver talking at the gas station. She calls it a rebranding launch." Rebranding. She was celebrating the death of the past. She was dancing on my son's grave. My grip tightened on my cane until my knuckles turned white. I felt a cold, hard rage settle in my stomach. It wasn't the hot anger of a tantrum. It was the cold, calculating anger of a soldier. "This is good," I said. Mike looked at me like I was crazy. "Good. Ray, there are 100 people in there. How are we going to search for a safe with a disco going on in the living room?" "Because they are distracted," I said. "And the noise covers the sound of footsteps. If the house was empty, the alarm system would be armed. But with a party, the perimeter alarm is off to let guests in and out." I turned to look at my friends. "We are not going in the front door. We are going in the way we built it." Mike grinned. "The service access." "Exactly." We got out of the truck. The rain soaked us instantly, but I didn't feel it. We moved through the neighbor's hedge. Mrs. Gable, bless her heart, was deaf as a post and went to bed at 8 and circled around to the back of the property. The backyard was a mess. People were smoking by the pool, laughing, tossing cigarette butts into my rose bushes. I saw a young man in a white suit spill a red drink on the patio stones I had hand-cut. I wanted to scream. I wanted to march over there and thrash them all, but I forced myself to look away. "Focus, Ray. The mission is the safe. The house can be cleaned later." We crept along the dark side of the garage. There, hidden behind a trellis of ivy that hadn't been trimmed in months, was a small, unassuming door. It wasn't on the blueprints Jessica had. It was a maintenance access for the HVAC system that led directly into the utility room in the basement. Mike pulled out a key. He had kept a copy from when he installed the furnace 10 years ago. "Please work," he whispered. He slid the key in. It turned with a heavy click. We slipped inside and closed the door behind us. The noise of the party instantly changed from a roar to a muffled thump, thump, thump coming from the ceiling above. We were in. The basement smelled of damp concrete and neglect. My workshop was down here. I shone my flashlight toward my workbench. It was empty. All my tools, all my jars of screws, everything was gone. Swept clean. She didn't just evict me, she erased me. "Let's move," I signaled. We climbed the back stairs, the ones used by the catering staff. We could hear them shouting orders in the kitchen. More champagne. "Get the tray of oysters. Move it." We waited for a gap in the traffic, then slipped out of the stairwell and into the back hallway. We were now on the main floor, but in the servants' corridor. The noise was deafening here. Through the crack in the door leading to the foyer, I could see them. A sea of beautiful, terrible people. Women in dresses that cost more than my truck. Men in suits that fit too tight. They were drinking my son's wine. They were laughing. I scanned the room for Jessica. I didn't see her. "She must be upstairs," Jamal whispered. "The safe is in the study," I said. "The study is on the second floor attached to the master suite." "That is the lion's den," Mike said. I nodded. "Then that is where we go." We took the narrow servant stairs up to the second floor. My knee was screaming with every step, a sharp, biting pain that made me grit my teeth, but I wouldn't stop. I hauled myself up by the banister, sweating, breathing hard. The second floor was quieter but not empty. I could hear giggling coming from the guest rooms. People were using my house as a hotel. We crept down the hallway. The carpet was thick, muffling our heavy work boots. The door to the master suite was closed. This was it. Marcus's room, the room where he died. I motioned for Mike and Jamal to stay back. Watch the stairs, I mouthed. If anyone comes up, create a distraction. Break a pipe, pull a fire alarm. I don't care. Just buy me time. Mike squeezed my shoulder. Good luck, boss. I turned the handle. It was unlocked. Of course it was. Jessica didn't fear intruders. She owned the world. I stepped inside and closed the door softly behind me. The room was dimly lit. Candles were burning everywhere, dozens of them flickering and casting long dancing shadows on the walls. The air smelled of jasmine and something muskier. It took a moment for my eyes to adjust. And when they did, my breath caught in my throat. The room had been transformed. The oak furniture Marcus loved was gone. In its place was a low white platform bed covered in silk sheets. The walls were draped in sheer fabrics. It looked like a harem, not a bedroom. And on the bed, lying back with a glass of whiskey in his hand, was a man. He wasn't Marcus. He was young, maybe 25. He had the chiseled jaw of a model and the arrogant eyes of a shark. He was wearing a silk robe, my son's silk robe, the blue one I had given him for Christmas 3 years ago. I froze. The man looked up. He didn't look scared. He looked annoyed. He squinted at me through the candlelight, taking in my wetsuit, my cane, my gray hair. "Who the hell are you?" he drawled. "The catering staff isn't allowed upstairs. Get out!" I stepped forward into the light. The cane hit the floor with a heavy thud. "Take it off," I said. The man blinked. "What?" "The robe," I said, my voice shaking with a rage so pure it felt like it could burn the house down. "Take off my son's robe," he laughed, a short, cruel bark. "Oh, I get it. You are the father. The crazy old man Jessica told me about. The one living in a motel." He took a sip of the whiskey. "My whiskey. She said you might try to show up. She said you were pathetic, but she didn't say you were a burglar." He sat up, swinging his legs over the side of the bed. "You know I should call security," he said, looking me up and down with a sneer. "But honestly, you look like you are about to have a heart attack anyway. Why don't you just turn around and limp back to the gutter before you embarrass yourself further?" I looked at him. This boy, this parasite. He was sleeping in my son's bed, wearing his clothes, drinking his liquor, and sleeping with his wife. I felt a calm settle over me, the calm of the storm. I walked toward the bed. I didn't limp. I marched. "You think you are the first man to underestimate me because I have gray hair," I said softly. The man stood up. He was tall, athletic. He towered over me. "Get out, old man," he warned, stepping closer. "Or I will throw you down the stairs myself." He reached out to shove me. It was a mistake. I didn't use strength. I used physics. As his hand came toward me, I hooked the handle of my cane around his ankle. At the same time, I drove the palm of my hand into his solar plexus. He folded like a lawn chair. The air whooshed out of him. He hit the carpet with a heavy thud, gasping, eyes bulging. I stood over him. I pressed the rubber tip of my cane into the center of his chest, pinning him down. "I fought in Hue City, son," I whispered, leaning down so he could smell the rain and the old spice on me. "I have killed men with my bare hands while you were still swimming in your daddy's nutsack. Do not mistake old age for weakness." He wheezed, pawing at the cane, terror finally dawning in his eyes. "Now," I said, "you are going to stay here. You are going to be quiet, and you are going to think about your life choices." I reached down and ripped the robe off his shoulders. He scrambled back half naked and terrified, curling into a ball against the headboard. I didn't look at him again. I turned toward the heavy mahogany door on the far wall, the study. My heart was pounding against my ribs like a hammer. That burst of violence had cost me. My hands were trembling, but I had to focus. I opened the study door. It was dark inside, quiet. The party noise was just a distant hum here. This was Marcus's sanctuary. Jessica hadn't changed this room yet. It still smelled of old paper cedar and the tobacco from the pipe Marcus smoked on Sundays. I switched on my flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the rows of books. Architectural digests, history books, photo albums. Sarah said it was behind the built-in bookshelf. But which one? There were 4 walls of shelves. I closed my eyes. I tried to think like Marcus. He was an architect. He loved symmetry. He loved structure. But he also loved secrets. I remembered when we built these shelves. He was so particular about the load-bearing wall on the north side. He had insisted on reinforcing the studs. Because I want it to hold the weight of knowledge, Dad, he had joked. Or maybe because he wanted it to hold a safe. I walked to the north wall. I ran my hands over the spines of the books. "Where is it, Marcus?" I whispered. "Show me." I started pulling books out. Nothing. Just wood paneling. I moved to the next section. Nothing. Panic started to prick at the back of my neck. What if Sarah was wrong? What if Jessica had already found it? What if the lover in the other room got his breath back and called security? Time was running out. Then I saw it. On the third shelf, there was a framed photograph. It wasn't a picture of Jessica. It wasn't a picture of a building. It was a picture of me. It was taken 40 years ago. I was holding a young Marcus on my shoulders. We were standing in front of the frame of this very house just after we poured the foundation. I was laughing, pointing at the sky. Marcus was looking at me like I was Superman. I reached out and took the photo down. Behind it, the wood panel looked different. The grain didn't match perfectly. I pressed on the panel. Click. A spring-loaded mechanism released. A section of the false back popped open, and there it was. A small gray digital safe embedded deep into the wall studs. I let out a shuddering breath. I found it. But now came the hard part. The combination. I stared at the keypad. 6 digits. Sarah said he never sent the code. She said he would pick something only I would know. I tried his birthday. August 15th, 83. Red light. Beep, beep. I tried my birthday. March 12th, 50. Red light. Beep, beep. My hands started to sweat. One more wrong try and it might lock out. Or trigger a silent alarm. Think, Ray. Think. What did you share? What was the number that bound you together? I looked at the photo in my hand. Me pointing at the sky. Marcus looking at me. I remembered that day. It wasn't just any day. It was the day we broke ground. The day the first shovel hit the dirt. Marcus was 5 years old. I had given him a toy shovel. He had dug a little hole and buried a time capsule. A Hot Wheels car and a penny. He had asked me, "Dad, how long will this house last?" And I had told him, "It will last forever, son. It's a Bishop build." No, that wasn't a number. I looked around the room. My eyes landed on his drafting table. There was a set of blueprints rolled up. I unrolled them. It was the original design for the house. In the corner in the title block was the project number, job number 1980-001, the first house I ever built as an independent contractor. The house that started everything. The house we were standing in. Marcus was so proud of that number. He had it engraved on his fountain pen. I went back to the safe. My finger hovered over the keys. 198001. I pressed enter. The keypad beeped. A long, happy tone. Click. Whirr! The heavy steel door popped open. I fell to my knees. Tears blurred my vision. Inside, sitting alone on the felt-lined shelf, was a thick envelope. It was sealed with red wax. I pulled it out. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped it. On the front, in Marcus's neat handwriting, were 3 words, for Dad. Open only in case of emergency. I clutched the envelope to my chest. I felt the weight of it. It wasn't paper. It was my life. It was my son's love. It was the sword I was going to use to cut the head off the snake. I heard a noise behind me. I spun around, clutching the envelope. The lover was standing in the doorway. He was holding a golf club. His face was red, his eyes wild. "Give me that," he screamed. I stood up. I didn't raise my cane. I raised the envelope. "Go ahead, son," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "Swing that club. But you better kill me with the first shot, because if I get back up, God himself won't be able to save you." He hesitated. He saw something in my eyes that terrified him. He saw a man who had already lost everything and had nothing left to fear. Suddenly, the door to the hallway burst open. "Ray." It was Big Mike. He was panting, his shirt torn. "We got trouble. Security is coming up the back stairs." Jamal tripped the silent alarm by mistake. I looked at the lover, then at Mike. "Run!" I yelled. I shoved past the lover, knocking him into the doorframe. We sprinted into the hallway. The envelope was burning a hole in my pocket. I had the truth. Now I just had to survive long enough to deliver it. We didn't make it to the stairs. Big Mike and I rounded the corner, our boots sliding on the polished hardwood, only to find a wall of black suits blocking our path. It was the private security team. 3 of them. They weren't the neighborhood cops I used to chat with. These were hired muscle men with necks as thick as tree stumps. and eyes that looked like they had seen too much violence. "Hold it right there," the lead guard barked. He raised a taser. I skidded to a halt, my bad knee buckling under the sudden stop. Big Mike grabbed my arm to keep me from falling. "Don't move," the guard yelled, hands where I can see them. I clutched the thick envelope to my chest. It was pressed against my heart, thumping so hard I thought it might crack a rib. I had the truth. I had the weapon. I just needed to get it out of this house. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement behind us. The lover, the one I had pinned to the bed, was limping down the hallway, pointing at us. And behind him came Jessica. She wasn't running. She was walking slowly, a glass of champagne in her hand, her silver dress shimmering under the hallway sconces. She looked like an ice queen surveying her frozen kingdom. "Well, well," she said, her voice cutting through the tension like a razor blade. "I knew you were desperate, Ray, but I didn't think you were stupid enough to commit burglary in a house full of witnesses." I straightened my back. I ignored the guards. I looked straight at her. "It isn't burglary when you are taking back what was stolen from you," I said. My voice was breathless but loud enough for the guests peeking out of the bedrooms to hear. I held up the envelope. The red wax seal was still intact. "I found it, Jessica. I found the codicil." The kinship protection clause. Marcus didn't just leave you the money, he left you a test, and you failed. I saw a flicker of something in her eyes. Was it fear? Was it surprise? She took a sip of her champagne. She didn't look at the envelope. She looked at the guard. "Restrain them," she said boredly, "and call the police. I want to press charges for home invasion and assault." The guards moved in. Big Mike tried to step in front of me, raising his fists. "Don't touch him," Mike roared. "He is 73 years old." The lead guard didn't care. He deployed the taser. There was a crackling sound like bacon frying in a pan. Big Mike convulsed and dropped to his knees, groaning. "No," I screamed. Before I could move, two heavy hands grabbed me by the shoulders. I was slammed against the wall. My cheekbone cracked against the plaster. My arm was twisted behind my back with a force that made my rotator cuff scream in agony. The envelope fell from my hand. It landed on the carpet, face up. "For Dad." I watched helplessly as Jessica walked over to it. She looked down at the envelope with a faint smile. She nudged it with the toe of her silver stiletto. "You really thought you were clever, didn't you, Ray?" she said softly. "You thought you could just waltz in here, solve a riddle, and save the day like some hero in a movie." She bent down and picked it up. "You forgot one thing," she whispered, leaning close to my ear as the guard tightened the zip ties around my wrists. "You forgot that I lived with Marcus for 10 years. I knew his habits, I knew his passwords, and I knew about the safe behind the picture frame." My blood ran cold. The pain in my shoulder vanished, replaced by a numbness that spread through my entire body. "Open it," she challenged me. "Go ahead. Show everyone your big victory." She handed the envelope to the guard holding me. "Open it for him." The guard ripped the top of the envelope. He reached inside. I held my breath. I prayed. "Please, let it be the document. Let her be lying." The guard pulled out the contents. It wasn't a legal document. It wasn't a stack of papers with a notary seal. It was a handful of gray, flaky ash, and a single index card. The guard shook the envelope. The ash fluttered down onto the pristine carpet like dirty snow. He held up the index card so I could see it. In Jessica's sharp, angular handwriting, it read, "Nice try, Dad. Better luck in the next life." I stared at the card. The world started to spin. The hallway tilted. "You burned it," I whispered. My voice sounded like it was coming from underwater. "You burned his last wish. I found it 3 days after the funeral," she said, shrugging. "I was looking for cash. When I found the safe, I was disappointed. Just some sentimental papers about you getting the house. It seemed unfair. So I corrected it." She took another sip of champagne. "Possession is 9/10 of the law, Ray, and once something is ash, it is just dust. There is no proof it ever existed." I sagged against the wall. The fight drained out of me. It wasn't just a defeat. It was an annihilation. She hadn't just beaten me. She had let me play her game, let me think I was winning just so she could crush me at the finish line. The sirens wailed outside. Blue and red lights flashed through the windows, painting the hallway in violent colors. When the police officers came up the stairs, they didn't see a grieving father trying to save his legacy. They saw a crazy old man in wet clothes who had broken into a mansion and assaulted a guest. Jessica played her part perfectly. She cried. She trembled. She told the officers how terrified she was. He is obsessed, she sobbed into a lace handkerchief. He can't accept that his son didn't leave him anything. He attacked my fiancée. Please just take him away before he hurts someone else. Fiancée. The lover in the bedroom. She was already replacing Marcus. The officers were rough. They didn't care about my cane. They dragged me down the stairs past the staring guests, past the spilled drinks. I saw the pity in their eyes. The disgust. Look at that old man. How sad. How pathetic. They shoved me into the back of the cruiser. The hard plastic seat was cold. The metal grate separated me from the world. I watched through the window as they led Big Mike out in cuffs. He looked at me and shook his head. I had dragged my friend down with me. The ride to the precinct was a blur of neon lights and rain. I didn't say a word. I didn't ask for a lawyer. What was the point? The evidence was ash on a carpet. They processed me like a common criminal. They took my fingerprints, pressing my arthritic fingers onto the glass scanner. They took my mugshot. Turn left, turn right. They took my shoelaces and my belt so I wouldn't hang myself. They took my cane. You have to hop, old-timer, the booking officer said, pointing to the holding cell. I hopped. Every jump sent a spike of agony through my bad knee. I grit my teeth and moved forward, dragging my dignity behind me. The cell was a concrete box. It smelled of bleach vomit and old sweat. There was a stainless steel toilet in the corner and a wooden bench bolted to the wall. I sat on the bench. I put my head in my hands. I had failed. I had failed Marcus. I had failed Martha. I had lost the house. I had lost the company. And now I had lost my freedom. I closed my eyes and saw the ash falling on the carpet. That was my son's voice. That was his protection. Gone. Time lost its meaning in that cell. It could have been hours. It could have been days. I sat there shivering in my damp suit, listening to the drunk in the next cell singing off-key. Then the heavy steel door clanged open. Visitor, the guard, grunted. I didn't look up. I thought it was Sarah. I didn't want to see her disappointment. But the clicking of heels on the concrete floor told me it wasn't Sarah. I looked up. Jessica was standing on the other side of the bars. She had changed out of her party dress. She was wearing a crisp white power suit. She looked fresh, rested, and victorious. She motioned for the guard to leave us. He nodded and walked down the hall. She gripped the bars with her manicured hands and smiled. A genuine warm smile. The kind of smile a shark gives before it bites. You look terrible, Ray, she said. Orange really isn't your color. I stared at her. I didn't have the energy to hate her anymore. I just felt a deep, hollow emptiness. Why are you here? I croaked. To gloat. No, she said lightly. I came to bring you a deal. A deal I asked. She pulled a folded paper from her purse. My lawyer drafted this. It is a plea bargain. If you plead guilty to trespassing and agree to a permanent restraining order, meaning you never come within 500 feet of me, the house, or the company again, I will ask the district attorney to drop the assault charges. You will get probation, no jail time. She slid the paper through the bars. I looked at it. It was a surrender treaty. And if I don't sign, I asked. She shrugged. Then we go to trial. I have 3 eyewitnesses who saw you attack my guest. I have security footage of you breaking and entering. You will go to prison, Ray. At your age, a 5-year sentence is a death sentence. You will die in here. I looked at the concrete walls. She was right. I wouldn't survive prison. But there is one more thing, she added, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. The sale of the land closes tomorrow at noon. The developer is paying cash. Once that wire hits my account, the house will be demolished on Monday. By the time you get out of here on bail, there will be nothing left but dirt. She leaned in closer, her eyes gleaming. You lost Ray. Marcus is dead. The will is ashes. The house is gone. You are just a ghost haunting a life that doesn't belong to you anymore. Sign the paper. Go to the nursing home. Fade away. It is the only dignity you have left. She turned to leave, her heels clicking a rhythmic victory march. I watched her go. I looked at the paper in my hand. She had taken everything. She had anticipated every move. She was smarter, faster, and crueler than I could ever be. I crumpled the paper in my fist. I wasn't going to sign it. I would rather die in this cell than bow to her. But as I sat there in the dark, a thought sparked in the back of my mind. A tiny, desperate ember. She said she found the will 3 days after the funeral. She said she burned it. But Sarah had said something else. Sarah said Marcus had a digital backup, encrypted. The problem was the password. I had tried the date the house was built on the safe and it worked. 198001. But Marcus wouldn't use the same password twice. That was basic security. I closed my eyes trying to block out the smell of the jail. I went back to the memory of the fishing trip, the day he caught his first bass. Wait, it wasn't just a fishing trip. We were in the boat. It was raining. We were talking about codes. Marcus was obsessed with spy novels back then. He had asked me, "Dad, if you had to hide something where no one would ever find it, where would you put it?" And I had said, "In the foundation, son. The foundation holds up everything, but no one ever sees it." The foundation. I sat up straight on the bench. The project number was on the blueprints, but the date the concrete was poured. That was stamped into the wet cement in the corner of the basement. I had done it myself with a stick. Marcus had watched me. M&D, April 12th, 80. Marcus and Dad, April 12th, 1980. Jessica had burned the paper. She had emptied the safe. But she couldn't burn the cloud, and she couldn't burn a memory that was etched in concrete. I wasn't a ghost. Not yet. I stood up and limped to the bars. "Guard," I yelled. "Guard, I need my phone call. I need to call my lawyer." The guard at the end of the hall didn't move. "Please," I shouted, my voice cracking. "It is my right." He slowly stood up and walked over. "You already used your call, old man." "I didn't use it," I said. "I haven't called anyone. Check the log." He checked his clipboard. He frowned. "You are right. You got one. Make it quick." He handed me the receiver through the bars. I dialed Sarah's number. My fingers were shaking, but this time it was from adrenaline. "Pick up," I whispered. "Pick up." "Hello." Sarah's voice answered. She sounded like she had been crying. "Sarah, it is Ray," I said. "Don't talk. Just listen. The paper is gone. She burned it." "Oh, Ray," Sarah sobbed. "I am so sorry." "Stop," I said. "Listen to me. The paper is gone, but the digital file is still there. You said you needed a password." "Yes, but without the original—" "Forget the legalities for a minute," I interrupted. "We need to see what is in that file. I know the password, or I think I do. Ray, you are in jail. It is over. It is not over until the dirt hits the coffin." "Sarah," I snapped, "try this. Capital M ampersand capital D 041280. There was silence on the line. I could hear her typing. "Ray, that is a long shot. Just try it," I begged. I heard the click of keys, then a pause, then another click. The silence stretched out. My heart was hammering against my ribs. Then I heard a sharp intake of breath. "Ray," Sarah whispered. Her voice was trembling. "What?" "Did it open?" "It opened," she said. "But Ray, it is not just the will." "What is it?" I asked. "There are video files here," she said. "Dozens of them, and audio recordings. Ray." Marcus wasn't just hiding money. He was building a case. He recorded everything. I gripped the phone tight. "Can you get me out of here?" I asked. "I am coming down there now with a bail bondsman," she said, her voice hard as steel. "And Ray, I am bringing the laptop." I hung up the phone. I looked at the crumpled plea bargain on the floor. Jessica thought she had buried me. She thought I was an old man with a failing memory. But she forgot one thing. Concrete hardens over time, and so do I. I sat back on the bench and waited. The despair was gone. In its place was a cold, quiet anticipation. Tomorrow was going to be a very interesting day. The steel door of the holding cell didn't just slam shut. It echoed. It was a sound that vibrated in your teeth, a final period at the end of a sentence you never wanted to write. I sat on the wooden bench, my head in my hands. The smell of the jail, that mix of bleach-unwashed bodies and fear, was seeping into my pores. I felt old, older than 73. I felt like a ruin that had finally collapsed. The guard walked by, his keys jangling. He stopped at my cell and slid a piece of paper through the bars. "You got served, Bishop," he muttered, not looking at me. I picked it up. My hands were trembling not from the cold, but from the exhaustion that comes after a total defeat. It was a court order, a temporary restraining order. The respondent, Raymond Bishop, is hereby ordered to maintain a distance of no less than 500 feet from the petitioner Jessica Bishop, her residence, and any properties owned or managed by J. Bishop Design and Living. I read on. It got worse. The respondent is prohibited from contacting the petitioner by phone, email, or third party. Any violation of this order will result in immediate incarceration without bail. She hadn't just beaten me, she had legally erased me. I couldn't go to my house, I couldn't go to my former company, I couldn't even call her to beg for mercy. If I stepped onto the sidewalk in front of the home I built, I would be a criminal. And then came the second document, a notice of expedited liquidation. She wasn't waiting for the probate court to clear the red tape. She had filed an emergency motion claiming that the estate was insolvent bankrupt and that immediate sale of assets was necessary to pay off creditors. Creditors that she had likely invented. I closed my eyes. I could see it happening in my mind, the auctioneers walking through my warehouse, the for sale signs slapped on the doors of the pickup trucks I had bought for my crew, the heavy machinery, the excavators and bulldozers that Big Mike treated like his own children being sold for scrap pennies on the dollar. She was scorching the earth. She wanted to make sure that even if I somehow won, even if I somehow proved the will existed, there would be nothing left to inherit, just a pile of cash in her offshore account and a crater where my life used to be. I looked at the concrete floor. I had played by the rules. I had tried to be the honorable man. I had tried to protect my son's legacy with dignity, and what did it get me? A night in jail and a piece of paper telling me I was a danger to society. Maybe she was right, I thought bitterly. Maybe I was just a senile old fool chasing ghosts. Maybe the ash on the carpet really was the end. I leaned back against the cold cinder block wall. I was ready to give up. I was ready to sign her plea bargain, take my probation, and disappear into some state-run facility where I could stare out the window until I died. Bishop the guard yelled again. I didn't look up. What now? Another lawsuit, a bill for the room and board. Get up, the guard said, unlocking the cell door. You made bail. I froze. Bail. I didn't have bail money. My accounts were frozen. Big Mike was in the cell down the hall. I didn't have anyone left on the outside. Who paid it? I asked, standing up slowly. My bad knee popped loudly in the quiet block. Lawyer, the guard grunted. Lady in a navy suit. She is waiting and processing. Sarah. A tiny spark lit up in the darkness of my chest. It wasn't hope, not yet. But it was curiosity. Why would she waste her money on a lost cause? I walked out of the cell. The process of leaving jail is just as humiliating as entering. You stand there while they hand you a plastic bag with your belt and your shoelaces. You have to dress yourself in front of strangers, your fingers fumbling with the laces because your hands are stiff from the cold. They gave me back my cane. I gripped the handle like it was a lifeline. It was the only thing I owned that Jessica hadn't touched. I walked out into the lobby. It was bright, too bright after the dim light of the cell block. Sarah Cohen was standing by the exit. She looked exhausted. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and she was holding a large coffee cup like it was keeping her alive. But when she saw me, she straightened up. She didn't look at me with pity. She looked at me with intensity. Ray, she said, walking over and taking my arm. Are you okay? Did they hurt you? I am fine, I rasped, just old and tired. Sarah, why did you do this? The money, I can't pay you back. Pay you. We can talk about money later, she said, steering me toward the doors. Right now, we need to move. The hearing for the restraining order is in 2 days, but the sale of the land is happening at noon today. I stopped. I looked at the clock on the wall. It was 9 a.m. We have 3 hours, I said. 3 hours until the bulldozers come. Sarah, it is over. She burned the will. I saw the ash. Sarah pushed open the heavy glass doors. The morning air hit me cold, damp, and smelling of city exhaust. It felt like freedom. She walked me to her car, a sensible silver sedan parked in the loading zone. She opened the passenger door for me. Get in, Ray. I got in. The seat was warm. She had the heater running. She got in the driver's side, threw her bag in the back, and turned to me. She didn't start the car. She burned the paper, Ray, she said, her voice steady. She burned the hard copy. And yes, legally, that is a disaster. Without the original, the court will hesitate. See? I said, staring out the window at the gray walls of the precinct. I told you, she won. Sarah reached into the back seat. She pulled out a laptop bag. She set it on her lap and unzipped it. Inside was a sleek black laptop. It wasn't hers. It had a sticker on the lid, a small architectural sketch of a bridge. I recognized it. It was Marcus's laptop. She burned the paper, Sarah repeated. But she forgot who she was married to. Marcus wasn't just a builder, Ray. He was a geek. He loved redundancy. He didn't trust paper. He didn't even trust safes. She opened the laptop. The screen glowed to life, asking for a login. "Last night after you called me with the code, I didn't just sleep," Sarah said. "I went to my secure server. The password you gave me, the date of the foundation, it didn't open a document file. It opened a gateway. A gateway, I asked, confused. "It opened a remote access tunnel to this computer," Sarah said, tapping the keyboard. "Marcus had set up a dead man's switch. If that code was entered into the server, it meant he was dead and you were in danger. It triggered a download of a hidden partition on his hard drive." She turned the laptop toward me. The screen showed a folder named Project Phoenix, Evidence. But there was a problem. A big red padlock icon was in the center of the screen. "It is encrypted," I said, my heart sinking again. "We need another password." "No," Sarah said. "Not a password." Marcus knew that if Jessica tortured him or if she drugged him, she could get a password out of him. Or she could guess it, like she guessed the safe combination eventually. She pointed to a small scanner next to the trackpad. "He used biometrics, Ray, but not his." I looked at the scanner. I looked at my own hands. My rough, calloused, scarred hands. Hands that had laid bricks, mixed mortar, and held a baby boy in the air 40 years ago. "He used yours," Sarah whispered. "Mine," I said. "But how?" "I never touched his computer," Sarah smiled faintly. "Remember 3 years ago? You had that accident at the site. You cut your hand bad. Marcus took you to the urgent care." I nodded. I remembered. He had been so worried. "While you were waiting for the stitches, he asked you to help him test a new security app on his phone," Sarah said. "He had you press your thumb against the screen. He said it was just a calibration test." I remembered that. I thought he was just playing with a new toy. "He was scanning your print, Ray," she said. "He linked the highest level of encryption to the one person he knew Jessica could never turn, never buy, and never break. You." She pushed the laptop toward me. I looked at the little glass square. It seemed impossible. My son, terrified and trapped in a marriage with a monster, had pinned all his hope on this one moment. He had bet everything that his father would survive, that his father would fight, and that his father would eventually find his way to this car. Jessica thought I was the weak link. Marcus knew I was the lock. "We don't have much time," Sarah said, checking her watch. "If this works, the files inside are admissible in court because they are time-stamped and digitally notarized by the server connection. It proves the will exists, even if the paper is gone. And it proves the fraud." My hand was shaking. I wiped my right thumb on my trousers to clean off the jail dirt. I reached out. Ray, Sarah warned gently, "You only get 3 tries. If it fails 3 times, the system wipes the data to prevent hacking. 3 tries, no pressure, just the entire future of my family on the line." I took a deep breath. I closed my eyes for a second. I pictured Marcus, not the man in the casket, but the boy in the photo, the boy who trusted me to hold him up. "I got you, son," I whispered. I pressed my thumb onto the scanner. The screen blinked. Scanning. A red bar flashed. "Error. Partial read." My heart stopped. "Your hand is shaking," Sarah said, her voice tight. "Steady it," I tried again. I gripped my own wrist with my left hand to stabilize it. I pressed down harder. Scanning. Error. Print obscure. Clean sensor. 1 try left. I pulled my hand back. I looked at my thumb. There was a small cut from the scuffle with the guards last night. A tiny scab. It was distorting the print. "I can't do it," I said, panic rising in my throat. "My thumb, it is damaged." Sarah looked at the cut. She looked at the laptop. "Is there another finger?" she asked. "Did he scan any others?" I thought back. The urgent care, the waiting room. He had made me do it a few times. "Dad, try the index finger. It has a better swirl." The index finger. I looked at my right index finger. It was calloused, but the skin was intact. I looked at Sarah. "All or nothing," I said. She nodded. "Do it." I placed my index finger on the glass. I didn't press too hard. I just let it rest there, heavy as a stone. Scanning. The bar moved across the screen. It seemed to take an hour. Then the red padlock turned green. Access granted. A sound played from the speakers. It was Marcus's voice. "Hello, Dad. If you are hearing this, I am sorry. It means I didn't make it." Sarah let out a sob and covered her mouth. I stared at the screen as a list of files populated. Video files, audio logs, bank transfers, and right at the top a PDF labeled Last Will and Testament. Final. Video confirmation. "We got her," I whispered. My voice broke. "We got her." Sarah wiped her eyes and slammed the car into gear. "Hold on, Ray," she said, her tires screeching as she pulled away from the curb. "We have 2 hours to get to the title company and stop that sale." She didn't need to tell me to hold on. I was already holding on. I was holding onto the laptop like it was my son's hand. Jessica was about to find out that you can burn paper and you can lock up an old man, but you cannot delete the truth. "Drive," I said. "Drive fast." Sarah drove like a woman possessed. The city blurred past the rain-streaked windows of her silver sedan, a smear of gray concrete and red taillights. I sat in the passenger seat, my bad knee jammed against the dashboard, clutching the laptop with both hands as if it were a bomb that was about to detonate. We had 45 minutes before the title company closed the sale. 45 minutes before my house, my history, and my promise to my wife were turned into a parking lot. The green padlock on the screen had unlocked, but Marcus wasn't done with me yet. My son, the architect the planner had built a labyrinth. A new window popped up. It wasn't the files. It was a black screen with a single line of white text blinking in the center. Security question: what was the name of the giant? I stared at the words, the giant. My mind raced. Was it a building he designed? Was it a wrestler we used to watch on TV? Was it a character in a book? "Ray, talk to me," Sarah said, swerving around a delivery truck. "What does it say?" "It asks for the name of the giant," I muttered, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. "Think, Ray," she urged. "Think back." I closed my eyes, blocking out the motion of the car. I went back in time. I sifted through 40 years of memories. And then I smelled it. The scent of pine needles and damp earth. The sound of rain hitting a tin roof. It was 1988. Marcus was 8 years old. It was our first real fishing trip. We had driven 3 hours north to a cabin on Lake Michigan. I wanted to make a man out of him. I wanted to teach him how to hook a worm, how to cast a line, how to be patient. But it had rained for 3 days straight. Not just rain, a deluge. We were stuck inside that tiny, drafty cabin with a leak in the roof and a deck of cards. Marcus was bored. He was disappointed. He sat by the window, fogging up the glass with his breath tracing the raindrops with his small finger. "Dad," he had asked, his voice trembling, "are the fish scared of the thunder?" I had laughed, pulling him onto my lap. "No, son. The fish love the rain. It brings out the giants." The giants, his eyes had gone wide. "Yes," I told him, spinning a tall tale to keep him entertained. In the deepest part of the lake, there is a fish as big as a car. He has whiskers like a catfish and scales like armor. He is the king of the lake. "What is his name?" Marcus whispered. I had looked at the leaky roof, at the gray sky, at the water rising against the dock. I wanted to give him a name that sounded strong, a name that sounded like it could survive any storm. "His name is Gibraltar," I said, "like the rock, because he never breaks." We spent the rest of the weekend drawing pictures of Gibraltar. Marcus drew him with a crown. He drew him eating sharks. He forgot about the rain. He forgot about being bored. We didn't catch a single fish that trip, but we caught a legend. Years later, when Marcus was in college and feeling overwhelmed by his exams, he would call me. "Dad," he would say, "the storm is getting bad." And I would tell him, "Remember Gibraltar. Be the rock." I opened my eyes. The laptop screen was still blinking. The giant. It wasn't a random password. It was a message. It was Marcus telling me from beyond the grave that he knew a storm was coming, and he needed me to be the rock one last time. My fingers shook as I typed the letters. Gibraltar. I hit enter. The screen went black for a terrifying second. Then it flooded with light. Folders appeared. Dozens of them, organized by date, by name, by crime. I clicked on the folder labeled Evidence. Final. A video player opened. I pressed play. The image was grainy at first, then sharpened. It was recorded from a hidden camera, low angle, probably hidden in a bookshelf or a clock radio. It was the master bedroom. My house. I saw Marcus. He looked thin, frail. This must have been taken weeks before he died. He was sitting in the armchair, holding his head in his hands. Then Jessica walked into the frame. She wasn't wearing the black of a grieving wife. She was wearing a red dress. She looked vibrant, annoyed, and cruel. "Sign the papers, Marcus," she said. Her voice was clear, sharp as broken glass. "I can't," Marcus said, his voice weak. That is the payroll account. If I transfer that money to your shell company, the guys won't get paid. Big Mike won't get paid. Dad's pension check will bounce. I don't care about your dad and his team of losers, Jessica spat. I need the deposit for the villa by Monday. She walked over to him. She didn't hug him. She leaned down and whispered something. If you don't sign it, I will release the photos, Marcus. I will send them to the ethics board. I will tell them you bribed the city inspector on the bridge project. I will ruin the family name. Your father will die in disgrace. Marcus looked up at her, tears streaming down his face. You know that isn't true. Dad never bribed anyone. It doesn't matter what is true. Jessica laughed. It matters what people believe, and I am very convincing. She handed him a tablet. Sign it, or watch your father go to prison. Marcus took the tablet. His hand was shaking. He signed. I watched the video, tears blurring my vision. He didn't steal the money for himself. He didn't start Project Phoenix to hide assets from me. He was being blackmailed. He was protecting me. He sacrificed his integrity, his company, his life just to keep my name clean. But the video didn't end there. Another man walked into the room. It was the lover, the one I had met last night. He walked right up to Jessica and kissed her, right in front of my dying son. Did he sign it? The lover asked. He signed, Jessica said, wiping her mouth. He is a good little puppet. She looked at Marcus with pure contempt. Hurry up and die, Marcus, she said coldly. We are tired of waiting. The video ended. I sat there frozen. The silence in the car was heavier than the grave. Sarah had pulled over to the shoulder of the highway. She was staring at the screen, her hand covering her mouth, horror written all over her face. Oh my God, she whispered. That isn't just embezzlement. That is psychological torture. That is driving someone to suicide. I closed the laptop gently. I didn't feel sadness anymore. I didn't feel grief. I felt cold. I felt like Gibraltar. I looked at the file list again. There were bank statements, wire transfers showing millions of dollars moved to accounts in the Cayman Islands. There were emails between Jessica and the lover plotting the liquidation of the company 6 months before Marcus died. It was all there. Every lie, every theft, every betrayal. Sarah said, her voice shaking. This is enough. This is more than enough. We can put her away for 20 years. I looked out the windshield. The rain had stopped. The sun was breaking through the clouds, lighting up the skyline of the city my son had helped build. Drive, Sarah, I said. Where to? She asked. The police station. The district attorney. No, I said. I looked at the time. 11:30. Take me to the title company, I said. She is selling my house at noon. I want to be there. Ray, it is dangerous, Sarah warned. You have a restraining order. If you walk in there, she will have you arrested before you can say a word. Let her try, I said. I touched the laptop lid. I am not going there to argue Sarah. I am going there to deliver a message. I looked at my hands, the hands that had held Marcus when he was a baby, the hands that had failed to save him from her, but I could save his memory. I want to look her in the eye when her world falls apart, I said. Sarah nodded. She put the car in gear and merged back onto the highway. The engine roared. We were coming for her, and we were bringing the giant with us. The engine of Sarah's car ticked as it cooled, a metallic sound that marked the passing seconds like a countdown. We were parked across the street from the title company, a sleek building of glass and steel that reflected the noon sun. It looked like a guillotine blade waiting to drop. Sarah unbuckled her seatbelt. Her hand was already on the door handle. Let's go, Ray, she said, her voice tight with adrenaline. We have 5 minutes before the closing. We kick down the door, we show them the digital will, and we stop this madness. I sat still. I watched the front entrance of the building. I saw Jessica's black Mercedes parked right in front, looking like a hearse that had arrived to collect a body. Wait, I said. Sarah froze. She looked at me like I had lost my mind. Wait, she repeated. Ray, are you crazy? We don't have time to wait. If she signs those papers, the title transfers. It becomes a legal nightmare to unwind. We have to stop the pen from hitting the paper. No, I said. My voice was low, calm, and colder than the holding cell I had slept in last night. We let her sign. Sarah let go of the door handle. She turned in her seat to face me, her eyes searching my face. Explain, she said. I looked at the building. I looked at the people walking in and out in their expensive suits, carrying briefcases full of lives they were trading like baseball cards. If we run in there now, I said, pointing a scarred finger at the glass doors, we stop the sale. Yes. We save the house. Yes. But what happens to Jessica? Sarah frowned. Well, we sue her. We prove the will exists. We eventually get her removed as executor. And she walks away, I said. She claims it was a misunderstanding. She claims she thought the original will was the only valid one. She hires expensive lawyers who argue that she was acting in good faith as a grieving widow. She keeps the money she stole from the company because that is a separate civil matter. She gets a slap on the wrist, maybe probation. I turned to Sarah. She drove my son to suicide, Sarah. She didn't pull the trigger, but she loaded the gun. She tormented him. She blackmailed him. She erased his legacy. A slap on the wrist isn't justice. It is an insult. Sarah was silent. She was a lawyer. She was starting to see where I was going. But I continued leaning closer. If she signs that contract, if she accepts that wire transfer, the game changes. Sarah's eyes widened. Fraud, she whispered. Wire fraud, I corrected her. Bank fraud. And theft by deception over $1 million. I nodded. The moment she puts her signature on that deed, she is selling property she does not legally own. Because the kinship protection clause was triggered the moment she kicked me out. The house belongs to the trust. It belongs to me. I looked back at the building. If we stop her now, she's just a greedy daughter-in-law. But if we let her sign, she becomes a federal criminal. She goes to prison, Sarah. Not for a weekend, for 10 years. Sarah sat back against the headrest. She let out a long breath. It is a gamble, Ray, she warned. If the judge doesn't accept the digital evidence, you lose the house forever. You are betting everything on a thumbprint scan. I am not betting, I said. I am executing an ambush. I learned a long time ago that you don't fire at the enemy when they are approaching the trap. You wait until they are standing right in the middle of it. I opened the car door. Let's go, I said. But we don't run. We walk, and we don't say a word until the ink is dry. We walked into the lobby of the title company. The air conditioning was freezing. It smelled of coffee and expensive cologne. The receptionist looked at my wrinkled suit and my cane, her nose wrinkling in distaste. Can I help you? She asked. We are here for the Bishop closing, Sarah said, flashing her bar card. I am legal counsel for the estate. The receptionist hesitated, but the card worked its magic. Conference room B, she said. They just started. We walked down the long hallway. The walls were glass. I could see into every room. I saw families buying their first homes looking nervous and happy. I saw business partners shaking hands. And then I saw room B. It was a large corner office. Jessica was sitting at the head of the table. She looked radiant. She was wearing a white dress, the color of innocence, the color of a bride. She was laughing, tilting her head back, exposing her throat. Sitting across from her was a man I assumed was the developer. He was thick-set, wearing a suit that was too shiny with a gold watch that caught the light. He looked like a man who enjoyed bulldozing history. Next to Jessica sat her lawyer, a sharp-faced man who was stacking documents in neat piles. I stopped outside the glass wall. They couldn't see us yet. We were in the blind spot behind a large potted fern. I watched her. I watched the woman who had slept in my son's bed and whispered poison into his ear. She looked so confident, so untouchable. She thought she had buried the past. She thought the old man was rotting in a jail cell, broken and defeated. I felt a surge of hatred so pure it almost made me dizzy, but I pushed it down. Hatred makes you shaky. I needed to be stone. The lawyer pushed a stack of papers toward Jessica. He handed her a heavy, expensive pen. This is it, Sarah whispered beside me. The deed transfer. I watched Jessica pick up the pen. She twirled it in her fingers. She said something to the developer, and they both laughed. She was probably making a joke about how easy it was. Sign it, I commanded silently. Go ahead, Jessica. Sign your life away. She leaned forward. The tip of the pen touched the paper. My heart hammered against my ribs. Thump, thump, thump. She wrote her name. Jessica Bishop. She flipped the page. She signed again. She flipped another page. Signed again. Every scratch of that pen was a nail in her coffin. She wasn't just selling a house. She was signing a confession. Done, the developer said. I could read his lips. He picked up his phone and tapped the screen. I looked at Sarah. Check the registry, I said. Sarah pulled out her phone. She logged into the county clerk's real estate portal. She refreshed the page, refreshed it again. Suddenly she looked up at me. Her eyes were fierce. "The lien is released," she whispered. "The wire transfer has been initiated. The sale is recorded." I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. She did it. She took the bait. She bit down hard on the hook and she swallowed it whole. I adjusted my jacket. I gripped my cane. I checked my reflection in the glass. I didn't look like a victim anymore. I looked like the Grim Reaper in a cheap suit. "Now," I said. We stepped out from behind the fern. I didn't knock. I just pushed the heavy glass door open. The sound of the door opening made everyone turn. Jessica's smile froze on her face. It didn't disappear immediately. It just hung there, a grotesque mask of joy that was slowly cracking. "Ray," she said. Her voice was a mixture of shock and annoyance. "How did you... You have a restraining order. You can't be here." I walked into the room. I didn't stop until I was standing at the opposite end of the table. Sarah walked in behind me, closing the door and standing in front of it like a sentinel. I ignored Jessica. I looked at the developer. "You just bought a house at 4215 Oak Street," I said. The developer looked confused. He looked at Jessica, then back at me. "Yeah. Who are you?" "I am the owner," I said. Jessica stood up, slamming her hands on the table. "This is harassment. Call the police. He is violating a court order. He is senile. He doesn't know what he is saying." She looked at her lawyer. "Do something." Her lawyer stood up. "Mr. Bishop, you need to leave immediately. The property has been sold. Mrs. Bishop is the sole executor and beneficiary." I looked at the lawyer, then I looked at Jessica. I smiled. It was the first time I had smiled in days. "You are right, Jessica," I said softly. "You sold it. I saw you sign the papers. I watched you take the money." "So get out!" she screamed, losing her composure. "Go back to the gutter where you belong." I reached into my jacket pocket. I didn't pull out a weapon. I pulled out the laptop. Marcus's laptop. I set it gently on the polished mahogany table. "You burned the paper, Jessica," I said. "I know. I saw the ashes." Her face went pale. Her eyes darted to the developer, then back to me. "But you forgot something," I continued, my voice steady and filling the room. "You forgot that Marcus was smarter than you. You forgot that he was terrified of you. And you forgot that in the 21st century, fire doesn't destroy everything." I opened the laptop lid. Sarah stepped forward and plugged an HDMI cable from the room's projector into the side of the laptop. "What is this?" the developer asked, standing up. "What is going on?" "Sit down," Sarah ordered him. Her voice was like a whip crack. "Unless you want to be named as a co-conspirator in a federal fraud case, you will sit down and watch." The developer sat. Jessica didn't sit. She stood there trembling, her knuckles white as she gripped the edge of the table. "Ray, don't," she whispered. "Whatever you think you have, we can talk. I can give you money. I can give you half." "Half?" I asked. I laughed. A dry, humorless sound. "You offered me a plea bargain in a jail cell, Jessica. You told me to fade away. You told me to die." I pressed the space bar on the laptop. The screen on the wall flickered to life. It was the video of the signing, the video of Marcus crying, the video of the blackmail. The room went dead silent. The only sound was Marcus's voice from the speakers begging for mercy and Jessica's voice cold and cruel, threatening to destroy me. I watched the developer's face turn gray. I watched the lawyer slowly back away from Jessica, creating distance between them as if she were contagious. And I watched Jessica. She wasn't looking at the screen. She was looking at me. Her eyes were wide, filled with a terror that went beyond the fear of prison. It was the terror of seeing a ghost. The video ended. Then Sarah clicked on the next file, the PDF of the kinship protection clause. She read it aloud. "If the property is sold without Raymond Bishop's consent, the estate transfers immediately to the Phoenix Trust." She looked up. "That means Mrs. Bishop, that as of 10 minutes ago when you signed that deed, you didn't own this house. The trust did, and Ray controls the trust." Sarah turned to the developer. "And you, sir, you just wired $2 million to a fraudulent seller. The contract is void. The house is not yours." The developer's face turned purple. He turned to Jessica. You told me you had clear title, he roared. You told me the old man was crazy. Jessica stumbled back. She looked for an exit, but Sarah was blocking the door. It is a fake, she stammered. It is a deep fake. He made it up. He is a liar. I walked around the table. I moved slowly, listening to the heavy thud of my boots on the carpet. I stopped right in front of her. I leaned in close. I could smell her fear. It smelled like sweat and expensive perfume turning sour. You played the game, Jessica, I whispered. You played it hard. You took my son. You took my home. You took my dignity. I reached out and picked up the pen she had used to sign the papers. But you made one mistake, I said. You thought you were the player, but you were just the piece. And Marcus was the board. I dropped the pen. It clattered on the table like a gunshot. Sarah, I said, not taking my eyes off Jessica, call the police and tell them to bring the federal agents this time. We have a wire fraud case to report. Jessica's knees gave out. She slumped into her chair, covering her face with her hands. I stood over her, feeling the ghost of my son standing beside me. We had done it. The trap had snapped shut, and there was no way out. The conference room at the title company was silent, but it was the silence of a battlefield after the first volley of cannon fire. The smoke hadn't cleared yet. The casualties hadn't been counted. Jessica was sitting in her chair, her face pale, but her eyes were still burning with that manic, desperate defiance. She was a narcissist. I knew that now. And the thing about narcissists is that they don't accept defeat. They rewrite reality until it fits their narrative. The developer had fled the room, muttering about calling his legal team. Sarah was standing by the door, the guardian of the exit. I was standing at the head of the table, Marcus's laptop humming softly in front of me. Jessica took a deep breath. She smoothed the front of her white dress. She looked at her lover, the man who had worn my son's robe, and then she looked at her lawyer. This is a shakedown, she said. Her voice was trembling, but it was gaining strength. She was rebuilding her walls brick by brick right in front of our eyes. She turned to me. You think you are clever, Ray. You think a grainy video and a stolen laptop are going to stand up in court. My lawyer will argue that it is a deepfake, AI generated. It is inadmissible. She reached into her purse. She didn't pull out a tissue. She pulled out a checkbook. I watched her with a mixture of pity and disgust. She really didn't get it. She didn't understand that some things cannot be bought. She scribbled something on a check. She tore it out with a sharp, ripping sound. She slid it across the mahogany table toward me. I looked down at it. $5,000. Here she said, her voice dripping with condescension. This is what you want, isn't it? Money. You are broke. You are homeless. You are sleeping in a jail cell. She leaned back, crossing her arms. Take it, Ray. It is a charity payment. Sign a non-disclosure agreement, admit that you fabricated this evidence, and I won't press charges for the hacking. I will even let you keep your old truck. Her lover chuckled nervously. Yeah, old man. Take the money. Go buy yourself some soup. I didn't touch the check. I didn't even blink. You are trying to bribe a witness in front of two lawyers, I said softly. You are digging the hole deeper, Jessica. It is not a bribe, she snapped. It is a settlement. It is me being generous to the father of my late husband despite him being a senile, vindictive lunatic. She looked at her lawyer. Tell him he has no case. Her lawyer looked uncomfortable. He was shuffling papers, avoiding eye contact. Mrs. Bishop, he mumbled. If the digital timestamp on that file is authentic, we have a problem. I don't pay you to have problems, she hissed. I pay you to fix them. She turned back to me. Her eyes narrowed. You are pathetic, Ray. Marcus hated you. Do you know that? He used to tell me how suffocating you were. My dad the hero. My dad the saint. He laughed at you behind your back. He only kept you around out of pity. She was trying to hurt me. She was trying to find the one weak spot in my armor. And now you are here ruining his legacy, she continued, trying to steal from his widow. You should be ashamed. Just sign the check, Ray. Take the $5,000. It is more than you are worth. It is more than Marcus thought you were worth. I stood there listening to her poison. It washed over me like dirty water. It didn't stick. I looked at Sarah. Is it time I asked? Sarah stepped forward. She walked to the table with the grace of an executioner. She placed a heavy file on the table. We are not here to negotiate, Jessica, Sarah said. Her voice was cool, professional, and deadly. And we are not here to discuss the validity of the video. The FBI Cybercrimes Unit can do that when they arrive. Jessica flinched at the word FBI. We are here, Sarah continued to complete the reading of the last will and testament of Marcus Bishop. The will is done, Jessica shouted, slamming her hand on the table. It was probated. I am the beneficiary. It is over. That was the primary will, Sarah said calmly. But as Mr. Bishop has demonstrated, there is a codicil, a triggered amendment, and since you just signed the deed of sale, the condition for that amendment has been met. Sarah opened the file. According to the laws of this state, when a codicil is activated by a specific event, in this case, the attempted sale of the family estate, it must be read into the record immediately in the presence of all parties. She looked at Jessica. You might want to sit down for this. Jessica didn't sit. She stood defiantly, her chin raised. Read your fairy tale. It doesn't change anything. Sarah began to read. I, Marcus Bishop, acting of my own free will and under no duress, hereby establish the Phoenix Trust. She looked up. This is the standard part. But here is the item you missed, Jessica. The item you didn't find in the safe because it wasn't on paper. It was embedded in the metadata of the digital file. Sarah turned the page. Item 7, the disinheritance clause. Jessica's eyes flickered. In the event that my wife, Jessica Bishop, is found to have engaged in infidelity, financial coercion, or actions leading to the estrangement of my father, she is to be stripped of all marital assets. That is standard, Jessica scoffed. You have to prove it. Infidelity is hard to prove. Sarah smiled. It was a terrifying smile. Wait, she said. There is one more item. She turned to the final page. Item 8, the insurance policy. Jessica frowned. Insurance. I, Marcus Bishop, have taken out a life insurance policy in the amount of $5 million. Jessica's eyes lit up. $5 million. She didn't know about this. Greed instantly replaced fear on her face. However, Sarah read, on her voice rising. The beneficiary of this policy is not my wife. The beneficiary is the Bishop Family Foundation, a nonprofit organization dedicated to providing legal defense for victims of elder abuse. Jessica's mouth dropped open, and Sarah continued, delivering the final blow. I have linked the payout of this policy to a specific condition. The policy will only pay out if my death is ruled natural. If, however, evidence surfaces that my death was caused or hastened by psychological duress, blackmail, or coerced negligence. Sarah paused. The room was so quiet, I could hear the hum of the air conditioner. Then the policy converts into a fund for the private prosecution of the responsible party. Jessica staggered back. She grabbed the back of her chair to steady herself. Prosecution, she whispered. Sarah closed the folder. Marcus didn't just leave Ray the house, Jessica. He left a war chest. $5 million specifically designated to hire the best prosecutors, the best investigators, and the best forensic accountants in the country to hunt you down. I stepped forward. I looked at the check for $5,000 still sitting on the table. You offered me $5,000 to go away, I said. I picked up the check. I ripped it in half. Then I ripped it again. My son left $5 million to make sure you never sleep soundly again, I said. He knew you would kill him, Jessica. Maybe not with a gun, but he knew you would end him. And he made sure that his death would be the key that locks your cell. Jessica looked at me. She looked at the torn check. She looked at the laptop. For the first time, the mask completely fell away. The arrogance was gone. The defiance was gone. All that was left was a small, terrified criminal who realized she had walked into a room she couldn't buy her way out of. She turned to her lawyer. Do something, she shrieked. Fix this. The lawyer closed his briefcase. I am sorry, Mrs. Bishop, he said coldly. I cannot represent a client in a matter where the legal fees are being paid with stolen funds. I am recusing myself. He walked out. Jessica stood alone. Her lover had backed into the corner looking at his phone, probably deleting texts, probably looking for an Uber. I walked up to her. You called me a loser, Jessica, I said. You said I was nothing. I leaned in close. I am Ray Bishop. I built this city. And today, I am taking out the trash. Suddenly, the glass doors at the end of the hallway opened again. This time, it wasn't a developer. It wasn't a client. It was a team of agents in windbreakers. FBI. Jessica let out a sound that wasn't human. It was the whimper of a trapped animal. She looked at me one last time. Ray, please, she begged, grabbing my sleeve. We are family. I gently removed her hand from my arm. I brushed the spot where she had touched me as if it were dirty. "No," I said. "We are not family. You were just a mistake my son made, and I just corrected it." I turned my back on her as the agents moved in. I didn't watch them cuff her. I didn't need to. I walked over to the window and looked out at the street. The sun was shining. The storm was over. I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was Sarah. "We did it, Ray," she whispered. I nodded. "Let's go home," I said. "Not the motel. Home." Because for the first time in a week, I knew the key would work. The air in the conference room was so thin, it felt like we were on top of a mountain. Or maybe it was just the oxygen being sucked out of the room by the sheer weight of the truth. Jessica stood frozen near the window, her hands gripping the sill as if she were trying to push herself through the glass and escape into the noon sky. Sarah Cohen did not look at her. She looked at the document in her hand, treating it with the reverence of a holy scripture. She adjusted her glasses, took a breath, and began to read the final paragraph of the codicil, the paragraph that Marcus had hidden behind a firewall of love and fear. Item 9. Sarah read, her voice steady and echoing against the glass walls. The trigger clause. She paused, letting the words hang there. "I, Marcus Bishop, hereby declare that the bequest of my estate to my wife is conditional upon her treatment of my father, Raymond Bishop. Should my wife, Jessica Bishop, at any time attempt to evict, remove, or coerce my father to leave his primary residence at 4215 Oak Street, or should she attempt to place him in an assisted living facility against his will, then the entirety of my estate, including the house, the company, and all liquid assets, shall bypass her completely." Sarah looked up, her eyes locking onto Jessica's back. "In such an event, the estate shall transfer immediately and irrevocably to the Phoenix Trust with Raymond Bishop as the sole trustee and beneficiary." "Immediately," I repeated softly. Jessica spun around. Her face was a mask of panic and fury. Her perfect makeup was starting to crack under the strain of her contorted expression. "That is a lie," she screamed. "That is a fabrication, and even if it were real, you can't prove I kicked him out. He left on his own. He walked out. He is a confused old man who wandered away in the rain." She pointed a shaking finger at me. "Tell them, Ray. Tell them you left. Tell them I offered you the guest room, and you refused." I looked at her. I marveled at her ability to lie. It was almost a superpower. She believed her own fiction so completely that for a second I almost pitied her. Almost. But I didn't speak. I simply reached out and tapped the spacebar on the laptop again. I didn't need to argue. I had the ghost of the past to do it for me. The projector screen flickered. A new video file loaded. This wasn't the secret camera from the bedroom. This was the security footage from the front porch. The date stamp in the corner read October 10th, 2:15 p.m., the day of the funeral. On the screen, the rain was coming down in sheets. It was gray and miserable. The camera angle was high, looking down at the front door and the driveway. Everyone in the conference room turned to watch. The developer, who had been sweating through his shiny suit, leaned forward, his eyes wide. On the screen, a truck pulled up. Movers got out. They started hauling furniture onto the wet lawn. My recliner. My books. Then Ray Bishop, the man on the screen, walked into the frame. He was limping. He looked broken. We watched as Jessica stepped out onto the porch. We couldn't hear the audio clearly at first, just the hiss of the rain, but then Sarah turned up the volume on the laptop. "You cannot come in." "The digital," Jessica said, her voice cutting through the speaker. "I have the title. You are evicting me. On the day of my son's funeral, I am liquidating assets." "The on-screen," Jessica replied, cold and unfeeling. "I cannot have a 73-year-old man living in the basement." In the conference room, the real Jessica let out a small gasp. She covered her mouth with her hand. But the video wasn't done. We watched as Ray tried to run up the stairs. We watched the security guards, her hired thugs, slam into him. We watched the old man tumble backward down the concrete steps, landing in the mud. The developer let out a low whistle. "That is assault," he muttered. "That is straight-up assault." And then came the final nail in the coffin. On the screen, Ray asked about the urn, the blue ceramic jar. "I think the cleaners put it in the recycling bin," the on-screen, Jessica said. "Or the trash. I don't check the garbage." The video froze there. The image of me lying in the mud looking up at the woman who had just thrown my wife's ashes away like common refuse. I looked at the developer. "Does that look like I left on my own?" I asked. The developer shook his head slowly. He stood up and looked at Jessica with pure disgust. "You told me he was in a home," he said. "You told me the property was vacant." Jessica stammered, backing away until she hit the wall. It was taken out of context. I was stressed. I was grieving. "You were triggered," Sarah interrupted, her voice sharp as a whip. She slammed the file shut. "The moment you ordered those guards to block the door, Jessica, you triggered item 9. The moment that video was recorded, the ownership of the house transferred to Ray." Sarah walked around the table, closing in on Jessica like a hunter. "Which brings us to the problem of this morning." She picked up the deed of sale. The ink was still wet on Jessica's signature. "You just signed a federal document declaring that you are the legal owner of this property. You accepted a wire transfer for $2 million based on that declaration." Sarah looked at the FBI agents who were standing quietly by the door. "Gentlemen," she said, "what do we call it when someone sells property they do not own across state lines using a wire transfer?" One of the agents, a tall man with a stone face, stepped forward. "We call that wire fraud, ma'am, title fraud, and theft by deception." He looked at Jessica. "And given the amount is over $1 million, that is a Class B felony. Mandatory minimum sentencing guidelines apply." Jessica's eyes went wide. She looked at the agent, then at the developer, then at her lover. Her lover. The man in the expensive suit suddenly stood up. "I didn't know," he blurted out, raising his hands. "I am just the interior designer. I had nothing to do with the contracts. She told me it was all legal." Jessica turned to him, her mouth falling open. "You coward. You helped me plan it. You told me to sell it fast. I was just a consultant," he screamed, backing toward the door. The FBI agent blocked his path. "You can explain that to the grand jury, son. Sit down." Jessica slumped against the wall. She looked small. She looked young. The power, the arrogance, the unstoppable force of her greed had evaporated, leaving behind nothing but a scared criminal. She looked at me. "Ray," she whispered. Her voice was cracked and broken. "Ray, please. Don't let them take me. I am Marcus's wife." I walked over to her. My cane clicked rhythmically on the floor. I stopped 2 feet away. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel joy. I just felt a heavy, somber finality. "You were his wife," I said softly, "but you were never his partner." I looked at the laptop where the image of me lying in the mud was still frozen on the screen. "You wanted me to be a ghost, Jessica. You wanted to erase me. Well, you got your wish." I leaned in closer so only she could hear me. "The Ray Bishop you kicked out is gone. He died in that mud. The man standing in front of you is the executor, and I have a job to finish." I turned to the agents. "Take her." The agents moved in. There was no struggle, no dramatic chase, just the cold, mechanical click of handcuffs. Jessica began to sob. It was a loud, ugly sound. She cried about her reputation. She cried about her clothes. She cried about the unfairness of it all. But she never once cried for Marcus. As they led her out of the room, she passed the developer. "You are going to sue her, right?" I asked him. The developer looked at his phone where he was undoubtedly canceling the wire transfer. "I am going to sue her estate, and anyone who ever looked at her," he growled. "I am going to bury her in so much litigation she won't be able to buy a pack of gum for the next 20 years. The room cleared out. The lover was escorted out in cuffs as an accessory. The lawyer had fled. Sarah and I were left alone in the conference room. The projector hummed. The image of the rain-soaked driveway faded as the laptop went to sleep. I leaned heavily on my cane. The adrenaline was leaving my body, replaced by a bone-deep exhaustion. My knee was throbbing, my head was pounding, but my heart was light. Sarah walked over to me. She put a hand on my shoulder. "Are you okay, Ray?" I looked at the table. I picked up the pen Jessica had used. I turned it over in my fingers. "We stopped the sale," I said. "The house is safe." "Yes," Sarah said. "It belongs to the trust now. It belongs to you." "And the company?" I asked. She nodded. "The company, too. We will have to rebuild it." She gutted the accounts. "But the structure is there. The name is there." I smiled. A real smile this time. "I have the crew," I said. "Big Mike, Jamal. They are waiting. We can rebuild. We are bishops. That is what we do." I looked at Sarah. "Thank you," I said. "You risked your career for this. You broke the rules." She shrugged, a small, tired smile playing on her lips. "Marcus was my friend Ray. And besides," she paused, her eyes twinkling, "I always hated that white dress. I laughed. It felt good to laugh. "Come on," Sarah said, packing up the laptop. "Let's get out of here. I think you have a house to inspect." I shook my head. "Not yet," I said. "Where do you want to go?" I looked out the window at the sky. "Take me to the cemetery, Sarah. I have to go tell Marcus. I have to tell him the giant won." We walked out of the building into the sunlight. I didn't look back. The war was over. The enemy was in chains. And I was still standing. Old, broken, tired, but standing. The sound of handcuffs ratcheting shut is a specific kind of mechanical noise. It is cold. It is final. It sounds like a steel trap snapping onto the leg of a wolf that has been terrorizing the flock for too long. I stood there leaning on my cane, watching the agents pull Jessica's arms behind her back. She wasn't fighting them physically. She was too shocked for that. Her body had gone limp like a marionette whose strings had suddenly been cut. But her mouth was still moving. She was still trying to negotiate with reality, unable to accept that the currency she had used all her life, charm, lies, and intimidation, was no longer legal tender. "This is a mistake," she gasped, her voice hitching in her throat. "Do you know who I am? I am a pillar of this community. I am a widow. You can't do this to me in front of these people." The lead FBI agent didn't care who she was. To him, she was just a case number. He recited her rights with a bored, monotone rhythm that made the words sound even more terrifying. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you." Jessica didn't remain silent. She turned her head, her eyes scanning the room desperately for an ally. Her gaze landed on the man in the expensive Italian suit. Her lover. The interior designer who had helped her strip my son's house of its soul. "Julian," she screamed, Tell them I didn't know about the trust. Tell them we were just following the advice of the estate lawyer." I looked at Julian. He was backed into the corner near the ficus plant, his face the color of old ash. He wasn't looking at Jessica. He was looking at the door, calculating the distance to freedom. When the second agent moved toward him, Julian didn't step up to defend the woman he had been sleeping with. He didn't offer to share the blame. He threw her to the wolves. "I am just a contractor," Julian stammered, holding his hands up as if to ward off a blow. "I didn't sign anything. She told me the house was hers. She told me the old man was incompetent. I was just doing a job." Jessica's face crumpled. It was the look of someone who realizes that the ground they are standing on is actually a trap door. "You liar," she shrieked. "You helped me pick out the new furniture before Marcus was even cold. You told me to sell the land to the developer. It was your idea to demo the house." "I don't know what you are talking about," Julian yelled back, sweating profusely. "I barely know you." The agent grabbed Julian's arm and spun him around. "You can argue about who loved who more in the holding cell, pal. You are coming in for conspiracy to commit wire fraud." Jessica watched them cuff him. The betrayal hit her harder than the metal bracelets on her own wrists. She had destroyed her family for this man. She had killed her husband for this man. And at the first sign of trouble, he had denied her existence. She started to hyperventilate. Her chest heaved. Her knees buckled, and for a moment the agents had to hold her up by her elbows to keep her from collapsing onto the carpet. Then she looked at me. Her eyes were wild-rimmed with red, the mascara running down her cheeks like black tears. The arrogant, untouchable queen of the suburbs was gone. Standing there was just a scared, greedy child who had broken a toy she couldn't fix. "Ray," she whispered. Her voice was small. "Broken. Ray, please, think about Marcus. He wouldn't want this. He wouldn't want his wife in prison." I didn't move. I didn't blink. I let the silence stretch out heavy and suffocating. She took my silence for hesitation. She tried to step toward me, but the agents held her back. "I can fix it, Ray," she pleaded, the words tumbling out over each other. "I will sign the house back to you. I will give you the money. I will go away. Just tell them it was a misunderstanding. Please. I can't go to jail. I can't survive in there." I looked at the developer, who was busy stuffing his papers into his briefcase, trying to make himself invisible. I looked at Sarah, who stood by the door with her arms crossed, her face grim. Then I looked back at Jessica. "You are right, Jessica," I said. My voice was low, raspy, but it carried across the room like a judgment. She stopped crying for a second. Hope flared in her eyes. "You are right. I repeated. You won't survive in there. The hope vanished, replaced by a cold dread. Prison requires character, I said. It requires you to stand on your own 2 feet when everything else is stripped away. And you have spent your whole life standing on other people's backs. I took a step closer, leaning heavily on my cane. You asked me to think about Marcus, I said. I am thinking about him. I am thinking about how he sat in that chair in his own bedroom and cried while you threatened to ruin me. I am thinking about how you isolated him, starved him of love, and fed him stress until his heart exploded. I pointed the rubber tip of my cane at her chest. Marcus isn't here to save you, Jessica. And neither am I. She let out a wail that sounded like an animal in a trap. Ray, I am family, she screamed. I am your daughter. No, I said. And this was the moment, the final cut, the amputation of the rot. You never understood, Jessica. You thought family was a name on a marriage license. You thought a home was just square footage and market value. You thought you could buy people and sell them when they got old. I looked her dead in the eye. Home isn't walls, Jessica. Home is respect. And you evicted yourself from this family a long time ago. I turned away. I didn't want to see her anymore. She was already a ghost to me. Take her out, the agent said. No, I want my lawyer. I want my husband. She began to struggle, then a frantic, useless flailing against the inevitable. She was screaming about her rights, about her money, about how this was all a mistake. But the agents were professionals. They marched her toward the door. As she passed the threshold, her legs finally gave out completely. She went dead weight. The agents had to drag her, the toes of her expensive designer shoes dragging across the carpet, leaving 2 long lines in the fabric. Then the door closed. The screaming was cut off. The silence that followed was ringing in my ears. I stood there for a long moment, staring at the spot where she had been standing. It was over. The monster was in a cage. But I didn't feel happy. I didn't feel like celebrating. I just felt tired. A deep, bone-weary exhaustion that went down to the marrow. Mr. Bishop, a voice said. I turned. It was the developer. The man with the shiny suit and the gold watch. He looked shaken. He looked like a man who had just watched a car crash and walked away without a scratch. He walked over to me. He didn't offer to shake my hand. He just looked at me with a strange expression. Fear, respect. Maybe a little of both. I didn't know, he said quietly. I swear to you. She told me you were... Well, she told me a lot of things. I looked at him. He was just another shark in the water, but at least he knew when to swim away. It doesn't matter what she told you, I said. What matters is what you do now. I am pulling the contract, he said quickly. The wire is already canceled. I am erasing the project file. As far as I am concerned, I never saw this place. He hesitated, then looked at the laptop on the table. That was some heavy stuff, Mr. Bishop. What you did. I have never seen anyone take down a person like that. You dismantled her. I picked up my son's laptop. I didn't dismantle her son, I said. I just removed the scaffolding that was holding her up. Gravity did the rest. He nodded, swallowed hard, and hurried out of the room. Sarah walked over to me. She looked tired too, but there was a light in her eyes that hadn't been there in days. It is done, Ray, she said softly. The FBI will freeze everything. The accounts, the cars, the jewelry. It is all evidence now. She will be lucky if she gets a public defender. And the house, I asked. Sarah smiled. The house is safe. The deed transfer was fraudulent, so it reverts to the estate. And since the codicil is now active, the estate is the trust. And the trust is you. I nodded. I walked over to the window and looked down at the street. I saw them putting Jessica into the back of an unmarked SUV. She looked small from up here, just a figure in a white dress being swallowed by the system she thought she could outsmart. I saw Julian being shoved into a separate car. They were gone. I turned back to Sarah. Can we go now, I asked. Yes, she said. Where do you want to go? To the house. I thought about the house. It was currently a crime scene. It was full of bad memories and the smell of Jessica's perfume. No, I said, not yet. The house needs to be cleaned. It needs to be purified. I can't go back there until I get the smell of greed out of the curtains. I adjusted my grip on my cane. Take me to the impound lot, Sarah. The impound lot, she asked, confused. My car, I said. My Mustang. I disabled it so she couldn't sell it. It is still sitting in the yard at Miller's Towing. I smiled a small, genuine smile. I need to put the distributor rotor back in. I need to hear that engine run. I need to drive something that is honest, something that works when you treat it right. Sarah laughed. It was a good sound. Okay, Ray, let's go get your car. We walked out of the conference room, leaving the empty chairs and the torn check on the table. We walked down the hallway, past the staring receptionists, past the glass walls. I didn't limp as much on the way out. My knee still hurt, my back still ached, but the weight on my shoulders was gone. I pushed open the front doors of the building and stepped out into the city. The rain had stopped completely. The sun was high and bright, reflecting off the puddles on the sidewalk. The air smelled of wet concrete and exhaust, but to me, it smelled like victory. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs. I was 73 years old. I was a widower. I had lost my son. But I was Ray Bishop. I was a Marine. I was a builder. And I was still here. I looked up at the sky. We did it, Marcus, I whispered. The giant held the line. I walked towards Sarah's car, my cane tapping a steady rhythm on the pavement. Tap, tap, tap. It was the sound of rebuilding. The sun was setting on 4215 Oak Street, but for the first time in months, the shadows didn't feel threatening. They felt like a warm blanket being pulled up over a sleeping child. I stood in the driveway, leaning on my cane, watching the FBI agents remove the last of the evidence tape from the front door. They had taken everything that belonged to Jessica. Her clothes, her jewelry, her art. The house was empty, echoing and stripped bare. But it wasn't lonely. Behind me, the rumble of a diesel engine cut through the evening air. Big Mike's truck pulled up to the curb. He jumped out, followed by Jamal Henry and the rest of the crew. They weren't wearing their work boots today. They were holding buckets, mops, and gallons of paint. We heard you got the keys back, Boss Mike said, grinning like a kid on Christmas. But we figured the place might need a little exorcism. I smiled. You have no idea, Mike. It smells like sulfur and expensive perfume in there. We spent the next week scrubbing. We didn't just clean, we purified. We washed the walls. We ripped out the carpets where her lover had walked. We threw away the white platform bed and the sheer drapes. We opened every window and let the autumn breeze blow through the halls, carrying away the ghosts of the last 5 years. And then we started building. But we didn't restore it to the way it was. I didn't want a museum. I wanted a legacy. I remembered something Marcus had written in his diary, on one of the few pages where he wasn't talking about debt or fear. He had sketched a design for a workshop. He wrote, I wish I could teach kids how to build things, real things, not just digital models, but wood and stone. I wish I could give them the tools Dad gave me. So that is what we did. Sarah helped me set up the legal framework. We didn't sell the house. We converted it. Today, if you walk past 4215 Oak Street, you won't see a mansion hidden behind a gate. You will see a sign made of solid oak carved by Henry's steady hand. The Marcus Bishop Center for Vocational Arts. The living room is now a drafting studio. The dining room is a classroom where Jamal teaches electrical theory. The garage is the heart of it all. It is filled with lathe saws and workbenches. Every day after school, 20 kids from the inner city kids who look like me kids, who the world has already written off, come here. They don't learn how to take tests. They learn how to measure. They learn how to cut. They learn that if you build a foundation strong enough, you can weather any storm. I teach the master class on structural integrity. I tell them about the giant in the lake. I tell them that being a man isn't about what you own, it is about what you can hold up when everything else is falling down. Yesterday, I received a letter from the federal penitentiary. It was from Jessica. I didn't open it. I didn't burn it either. I simply handed it to one of my students, a bright young girl named Tasha. What should I do with this, Mr. Ray? She asked. I looked at the fireplace where a warm fire was crackling. Use it for kindling, Tasha, I said. It is cold outside and we need to keep the fire burning. She threw it in. I watched the paper curl and blacken. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel triumph. I just felt nothing. She was part of a past that no longer had a grip on me. This morning I woke up early. The air was crisp. It was a perfect day for a drive. I walked out to the driveway. She was sitting there gleaming in the sunlight. My 1969 Mustang Mach 1. Sarah had helped me retrieve her from the impound lot. The fees were astronomical, but I paid them with a smile. When I popped the hood and snapped the distributor rotor back into place, the mechanic had looked at me with wide eyes. "You disabled it," he laughed. "You old fox." I ran my hand over the candy apple red fender. She looked fast, just sitting still. I slid into the driver's seat. The leather creaked a familiar welcoming sound. I turned the key. Vroom! The 428 Cobra jet engine roared to life. It was a deep, guttural growl that vibrated in my chest. It was the sound of freedom. I put her in gear and rolled down the windows. I drove slowly through the neighborhood, waving at Mrs. Gable, who was tending her garden. She waved back, confused but happy to see me. I drove out of the city onto the highway, letting the wind whip through my gray hair. I wasn't running away. I was going to a meeting. I pulled into the cemetery gates and parked under the old willow tree. I walked up the hill, my cane sinking slightly into the soft grass. I reached the two stones sitting side by side. Martha Bishop, beloved wife and mother. Marcus Bishop, architect, dreamer, son. I sat down on the stone bench I had installed years ago. I looked at the names. "I did it, Marcus," I said softly. "The house is full of noise again. Good noise. The sound of saws and hammers. The sound of the future." A cardinal landed on Marcus's headstone. It looked at me, chirped once, and flew away. "I know you are watching," I whispered. "And I promise you I will keep building. I will keep teaching. And I will make sure that no one ever forgets the name Bishop." I sat there for a long time, watching the clouds drift across the blue sky. I felt a profound sense of peace settle over me. The war was over. The wounds would scar, but scars are just proof that you survived. I stood up. My knee hurt, but it was a good hurt. It was the pain of being alive. I walked back to the Mustang. I revved the engine one last time, a salute to the ones I loved. Then I put it in gear and drove back toward the city. Back to my students. Back to my life. I am Ray Bishop. I am 73 years old, and I am just getting started. Loyalty is a currency more valuable than gold, but it is often counterfeited by those closest to us. My journey taught me that blood does not guarantee family, and titles do not guarantee character. Greed may win the sprint, creating an illusion of power and success, but integrity always wins the marathon. We must protect our legacy, not just for ourselves, but to honor those who sacrificed before us. Real dignity isn't about how much you can take. It's about knowing when to stand up, draw a line in the sand, and say, "No more." Justice may sleep, but it never dies. If this story touched your heart, please hit the like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories about justice, resilience, and the power of the human spirit. Tell me in the comments, have you ever had to fight for your family's legacy? I read every single one. Until next time, stay strong and remember, the giant never breaks.